Hello and welcome. It's Kerry here along with Dr. Anthony Chaffee, and today we're hoping to tackle some of the most common carnivore diet myths and arguments against it in the hopes of giving you a clearer understanding, help you navigate these questions. A lot of times, arguments that prevent people from ever starting carnivore, myself included. It was one of the hardest decisions I ever had to make. Kind of went against everything I was ever told nutrition-wise. I thought I was gonna die of a heart attack, but I learned that, many of those fears I had were completely unfounded when I had the facts and I had the truth, and once I had that, I was able to completely transform my life. So the goal of today's video is to help share those truths and the facts and answer some of these more difficult carnivore arguments. So before we start, I just wanted to sincerely thank Dr. Anthony Chaffee for being so generous with his time and for sharing his truths about the carnivore diet because sincerely, I get choked up talking about this, but I never would have started carnivore if it wasn't for Dr. Chaffee and the other good doctors out there sharing the truth and answering these hard questions. And I'm on day 118 now. It's completely changed my life. It's changed the life of my daughters, my wife, my mother, so many people in my family, but it's completely transformed my life. And I really honestly don't think I would have started if I didn't have doctors like Dr. Anthony Chaffee sharing these truths and helping us overcome these arguments against carnivore, things that we've been told our entire life. So sincerely, thank you very much, Dr. Chaffee. And if you wouldn't mind, could you please introduce yourself? Even though probably everyone knows you already, but just in case.
Yeah. Well, look, you're very welcome. I'm really glad that my videos have helped, and that I'm sure that everyone else is very happy about that as well. That's sort of why we've done this. We've seen that this really has helped us. This has helped our families. This has helped our friends. This has helped our patients and the people around us. And it's something that we just really couldn't keep bottled up. We needed to tell as many people as we could so that they could experience this as well and take back their health. So for those who don't know, my name is Dr. Anthony Chaffee. I'm an American medical doctor. I currently live in Australia, and I'm a neurosurgical resident, or registrar as they call it here. And I've been studying nutrition and how that's diet and nutrition and how that's affect health and chronic disease and athletic performance for around the last 25 years. And at a university and postgraduate and professional level, and I've been applying that to myself and as well as my patients. And I found that it's one of the strongest tools in preventative medicine and reversing all these chronic issues, which make up 90% of the illnesses that we treat now as a mainstay of modern medicine, which didn't exist. That just simply did not exist in anywhere near the numbers that we're seeing them now before the 20th century. So that's something that I really hope that we can get back to, that level of chronic disease that we were seeing, in the 1800s and before. We had other problems, but we didn't have those problems. And, a lot of those other problems that we would have had in the 1800s, we have the modern medicine that we do have would absolutely amply cover those sorts of things very well. So as long as we can get rid of the chronic disease, I think we'll be in very good stead. So that's what I'm trying to do with the podcast and getting the word out.
Thank you, Dr. Chaffee. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Kerry from Homestead How. I started carnivore 118 days ago. I was pretty fired up this morning. I weighed myself, Dr. Chaffee, and I'm in the 160s club.
Nice.
When I started at my not when I started carnivore, but at my heaviest, I did a little bit of keto. I was 262. I'm currently 8 pounds shy of being down 100 pounds from my heaviest. But like I've said before, the weight loss is obviously great, but I've overcome clinical depression, arthritis, IBS, sleep apnea. I don't snore anymore. I can honestly say these last 118 days have been the best days of my life. I feel like I'm living like in a natural state, like a proper state that humans should be living in. And I didn't know what that was before. So it's completely changed my life. It's my purpose and my mission in life now is to share this with other people on YouTube. And I'm putting together a carnivore diet documentary. And so if people want to participate in that, it's carnivoredietmovie.com. It's completely crowdfunded. I'm really fired up about this as well because we just purchased our cinema grade camera that is required from Netflix and some of the big streaming services. You got to have a top of the line cinema grade camera. I have that now, and it's due in only in large part because of people generously donating. This is all being crowdfunded, and I put a lot of my own money into it. But we're already starting to film it, and generously, Dr. Chaffee, I asked him on our earlier episode if he'd like to participate, and he said yes, which is very exciting. So I'm looking forward to sharing this word with more people via the Carnivore Diet documentary. I guess the only other thing I wanted to say real quick was Dr. Chaffee and I did a video like this. It was about 1 week ago, and it's really resonating with people. You did a heck of a job, Dr. Chaffee. It was great. If people want to watch that, I left a link below. Anyone that's from my channel that isn't familiar with Dr. Chaffee, I don't know what you've been doing, but I left a link to his YouTube in my description below and his Instagram, and I highly encourage you to check out his YouTube channel. It's just doing some amazing stuff over there. So the idea behind this video is I had a lot of people submit on my community tab. I said, what are your biggest arguments against carnivore? What prevented you from starting carnivore? What do your friends, families, doctors say to you? And you're like, oh, geez, that makes me kind of scared about doing carnivore. And we've got some really good ones here. We had some good ones last week, but there's a lot that we missed, and then a lot of new ones came in. So I think we're going to start out with some of the more popular ones that people asked. And then please post a comment, put a big Q or question by it. And I guess we're trying to focus a little bit more, maybe not so much on carnivore questions, but if you have a specific argument or something that held you up from doing carnivore, if you could post that as a comment, that would be great. So here's the first one. Are you ready, Dr. Chaffee, to jump into some of these carnivore diet myths?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, here we go. The first one is, sure, you'll feel great on carnivore, eliminating processed junk, until 10 years from now when your arteries are clogged and you die of a heart attack. I've heard this one myself many times.
Well, I mean, it's fair enough, right? If we're going on the premise that saturated fat and cholesterol or dietary cholesterol affect heart disease, then certainly that should be something that you're worried about. I certainly agree that you can have a very big disparity in how you feel, just getting rid of some of the worst things that you could eat and getting more towards what you should eat. The fact of the matter is we are not herbivores. We're not even really omnivores. We require meat. We do not require plants at all. We can completely subsist and sustain on meat alone. And so how are we omnivores? Why do we need to eat plants? We don't need to eat plants. We could eat plants, but a lion could eat plants as well. Cats are obligate carnivores, and yet they can get up to 60% of their calories from carbohydrates. So does that make them omnivores just because they can eat another source of food? No. I mean, they require meat, and they do much better on meat. So do we, right? And so why would our evolved diet, why would our biologically appropriate diet, why would our design diet be something that's just going to kill us in 10 years? That doesn't make any sense. And when you look at all of these different populations throughout antiquity, they were thriving. They weren't just surviving, they were thriving. You look at the fossil record before the agricultural revolution, people were on average, literally, there was a line. Archaeologists can tell exactly when that changed. When agricultural revolution hit, when people picked up agriculture, they shrank by 5 inches on average. Their brains shrunk by 11% on average. Their teeth became crowded and screwed up and crooked. Their jaws were too small. Their wisdom teeth didn't come in. They had, dental caries, cavities. They had bone deformities, growth abnormalities, shortened femurs, and signs of tuberculosis in their spine and other sorts of areas. And these are all signs of malnutrition and poor health, right? Immediately after we had agriculture. So immediately after we started eating more plants, because we're probably eating some plants before that, and then people said, hey, you can plant this yourself, and hey, we can just do this here, we don't need to go around looking for it. So presumably those people were already eating some plants. Once they started eating a lot more plants, health suffered immensely. And that was just, that there's no GMOs, no pesticides or weird fertilizers or chemicals or anything. You can't blame all that. It was just the plants themselves. And so that just doesn't even pass the smell test. We had people living quite a long time. Oh, well, people only live to be 30 years old. That's not true. That's not true at all. That's average life expectancy from birth. First of all, you have no idea what people were living to in the Ice Age. How would you know? I mean, like you have fossil records and things like that. It's like, oh, well, they weren't all decrepit and broken and osteoporosis and having a bunch of arthritis. That means they didn't grow to old age. No, they just didn't get osteoporosis and arthritis. What animal does? What lion gets osteoporosis? What has their teeth fall out? What elephant gets gets tooth decay and has all sorts of serious medical problems and has to go into an old folks home? They just live, and then they die. They're at quite good health, active elderly adults, until they just run out of time and they just sort of keel over at that point. They're not dying slowly over decades of chronic disease and illness, right? And look at animals in the zoo, right? They live longer than they do in the wild because their life isn't as rough, right? And so, but they're not getting all these chronic diseases. They're not getting, dementia and Alzheimer's and having their teeth fall out and rot and their bones decay and all these sorts of things. None of that happens. None of that happens at all. We're the only animal species on Earth, apart from domesticated pets, that are fed something they're not supposed to eat either, that get these sorts of chronic diseases and debilitation and degeneration as they age. So, just right off the bat, we're like, why would eating meat cause any of these problems, which never existed in the numbers they're found in now, previously when we've been eating this way? In the 1800s, we ate more meat on average than we do now. No heart disease. Dr. Osler was the first professor of medicine at Johns Hopkins, one of the most famous medical professors ever, and teachers and authors. And I have his textbook from the 1800s, late 1800s. That was my great grandfather's, and when he was a doctor, probably a medical student, and he had said, like, in his entire career, spanning 2 decades before he became a professor, he said that he saw maybe 6 cases of angina, depending on the part of the world you're in, and so that's just painful, sort of tightness, chest pain, not necessarily heart disease, but just that sort of chest pain. No heart attacks. Never saw a heart attack, not one, in his entire career, right? And then in the 1920s, 1930s, all of a sudden heart disease is the number 1 killer in America, right? Unheard of before that. In 1910s or so, 1910 or so, was the first case of an autopsy confirmed case of someone who died from a myocardial infarction, from a clot in the heart clogging the arteries, and died from that, and confirmed on autopsy. The guy wrote it up and published it. People didn't believe him. They said that's bullshit. We've never seen that before. You're making it up. It's something else. You're just misinterpreting what you're seeing. Blood coagulates and congeals after they're dead. That's what you're seeing. Something like that. 10 years later, there was a number more of them, and they're like, ooh, okay. They didn't take it seriously for a decade, until they started seeing more and more of these. And like, oh, okay, that guy actually may not have been full of crap. 10 years after that, it's the number 1 killer in America. What happened, right? Well, if you look at our meat consumption was going down, actually. And it actually troughed right at when heart disease started really climbing up and became the number 1 killer in America. At the lowest point, we were eating the least amount of meat, and heart disease started spiking up exponentially. Unheard of a decade ago, now the number 1 killer, right? And so in the 1800s, when you're looking at, there was actually quite a lot. In the early 1800s, we actually eat a lot more meat than we even do now, right? And basically the most amount of meat that we've eaten in the last 200 years was in the early 1800s. Slowly sort of came down. Absolutely no heart disease. None. They just didn't notice it. Bullshit. You are making an assumption that is absolutely not borne out by the evidence. That we had copious medical records, we have copious journal articles. You made your name by discovering a new disease, like that guy who did the autopsy in the early 1900s. He was the first one to do it. That guy's name is always going to be as the first person to describe that in America, right? Everyone was clamoring to show this stuff. This was just a major killer. People were doing autopsies. People were doing dissections. They would have seen this. There are other sort of cardiac related death, not myocardial infarction, right? And so the idea that heart disease is caused by cholesterol and saturated fat, I mean, honestly, you don't even need to go in, get even to that point with realizing like this is completely bullshit. How can an ancient diet cause a new disease? This is a new disease. We've always been eating that way. How is that the thing? It's something new that came in, like processed foods, seed oils, refined sugars, things like that. These ingredients that have never existed before. So in fact, no, you feel better because this is how we're designed to eat. Saturated fat does not cause heart disease. End of story. Dietary cholesterol doesn't even really contribute to our serum cholesterol. You make most of it, right? And you only absorb what you need. Your body's very good at that. So, if you eat something that has a lot of cholesterol, you just don't absorb the cholesterol that your body doesn't want. Body's very selective on that. And the Journal of the American College of Cardiology published in 2020, massive literature review looking at, all the top studies, randomized controlled trials, meta-analyses of various trials, looking at all the highest level evidence to do with saturated fat and heart disease. And they found that there was no association between saturated fat intake and heart disease, but they found an inverse relationship between saturated fat and stroke rate. So the more saturated fat people were eating, the lower their risk of stroke, which is part of the cardiovascular disease complex, right? And the less saturated fat they were eating, the more higher risk of stroke they had. And there's tons of studies. There was a study, recent study that looked at nearly 12 million people, one of the largest studies that's ever been done, and found that the higher your LDL cholesterol, the longer you lived, and the less likely you were to die of all-cause mortality, the lower your risk of all-cause mortality was. There's sort of a U-shaped curve. So on the as you got lower, actually more people died. Your all-cause mortality went up, and as you sort of went up, that went down. And then in the big extremes of LDL cholesterol, it went up a little bit, but not that much. And what that could be is, familial hypercholesterolemia. These people have a slight increase in death, but that has been shown to not be because of the cholesterol level, but because that there are some of these people, more of these than the rest of the population, that have familial hypercholesterolemia, that also have clotting disorders and are hypercoagulable. So they're more likely to clot. And that's what a heart attack is, right? You get a little bit of damage, clots off, and you block off the blood supply. Same with strokes, a lot of different strokes. There's different kinds of strokes. And so when you pair those out and you separate out the ones who have that genetic abnormality and ones who just have hyper high cholesterol, the ones with super high cholesterol, no increased risk, none above baseline of the population. So that's likely what that is. You have this group of people with with congenitally massive cholesterol. Some of them are predisposed to clotting more. Some of those will die more, but it's not even all that much more. After you get above the age of 50, it's even. So this idea that it's just a ticking time bomb is nonsense. But it's a fair question though, because that's something that we've been hammered with for decades now, but it's just flat out untrue. And I'll just end with this. This is not just untrue. This was not just false. It was fraudulent. The Journal of the American Medical Association published in 2016 actual internal memos from the sugar companies back in the 50s and 60s, detailing how they were paying off 3 Harvard professors to falsify data and publish fraudulent studies to make it appear as if cholesterol caused heart disease when it was really sugar. And one of those professors was named head of the USDA, and it was he who authored and published the 1977 USDA declaration stating that cholesterol caused heart disease, and or at least was associated with it. And so that was the recommendation: stop eating fat and cholesterol, stop eating meat, stop eating eggs, start eating heart healthy, low fat grains, vegetables, fruits. And what are we going to do? This is a large portion of our dietary calories, our caloric intake was from animal fats. And so they said, okay, well, just replace that with sugar then. It's fine. Sugar and seed oils. So sugar and seed oils went up dramatically. The amount of seed oils that we consumed in America from the 1970s, and this is Pew Institute research, they showed that, and using USDA numbers, showed that they over tripled the amount of, we over tripled the amount of seed oils that we consumed since the 1970s to today, and over tripled the amount of high fructose corn syrup from the 1970s to today. Now, we slightly came off on cane sugar. That went down a bit, but we replaced it and then a lot more with high fructose corn syrup. So the amount of sugar that we ate, went up quite a lot. It sort of petered out and sort of come down a bit in recent decades, but it did go up significantly from the 1970s, and the seed oils are still on the rise. So, excuse me. So that is much more likely to be what's indicated here. Something that we are eating more of and have never eaten before, have never been anywhere. It has just not been in nature, didn't exist before that. That this is a new construct. These seed oils are manufactured. They're brand new. Some of these didn't exist before the 50s. Some of them are even more recent than that. And so, why would something that we've always been eating and have been eating more of previously not caused the disease that we're seeing now, if that were the cause?
Right. Wow. Yeah, I think we talked about this in the last episode, but it's like, if you want to sell an incredible amount of sugar, it's really easy. Just demonize meat. So a lot of the things I've heard over the years, I never really thought about that before. One other thing, Dr. Chaffee, you mentioned just now, and you mentioned a little bit before, and it really resonated with people, was sort of the natural state of animals. I had a bunch of family over yesterday, and one particular person, he has like this skin condition. His skin was like falling off his arm, overweight, fatigued. I really felt for him because he had a lot of issues that I had before. And so I used your sort of analogy, and I was like, we have a lot of deer by our property. I'm like, imagine if you saw a family of deer over there, and their fur was coming off their arms, and they had big bags under their eyes, and their belly was touching the ground, and they had big flaps under their legs. You would drive by and you saw a whole family of deer like that. You would be like, oh my goodness, what's wrong with them? They're sick. They're so sick. It's sad. Like we should do something about that. But then you go to the grocery store, it's like every human looks like that, and it just becomes our new normal. Like, oh, that's just for taken. But that's not the natural state of an animal. It's not the natural state of what a human should feel like. I think that's one thing that's tough about being a human and kind of overcoming some of these carnivore arguments is we're so set in our current time, and things just slowly become normal. But some of the things you're referencing from 1800s and stuff like that, if you look back, it's really abnormal what we're doing right now. People keep telling me carnivore diet, oh, that's a fad diet. I'm like, no, the way people are eating now is a fad diet when you compare it to all time of what people have been eating. So
we'll look at the definition of a fad diet, right? Fad diet is, it's highly restrictive. You're cutting out major food groups, something that's just sort of flash in the pan. It's not going to be there because it's not healthy, right? It's not something that can be perpetuated, right? No one says that about a vegan diet or a vegetarian diet. And you cut out meat, something we've been eating forever. It has never been argued in any serious format that humans are anything but apex predators, right? Top of the food chain. Now, some of these strange people are saying like, oh no, actually, we're vegans, we're just like orangutans, we're frugivores. And we're like, no, that's not what we are. And no serious biologist, zoologist, or anthropologist or paleoanthropologist or any evolutionary biologist has ever said that in any serious context. I have never heard that ever. And speaking with people like Dr. Mickey Van Doren and Professor Bill Schindler, who are PhDs, and Bill Schindler was a now retired professor of paleoanthropology and archaeology at the University of Maryland. No one is arguing that we were vegan, that we were vegetarians and frugivores and things like that. No one at all. And so this is just propaganda, really. So what is a fad diet? Okay, something that's very restrictive. You're cutting out whole food groups, all that sort of stuff. Okay, so no one's saying that about a vegetarian diet. They're saying, oh, that's great. It's going to save the planet. It's so good for you. Well, no, it's not. No to all of those. And why is that not a fad diet? And what is fad like of eating what we're designed to eat biologically. How is that a fad diet? How is that a flash in the pan? How is that something that's just come out of nowhere? That's what we've been eating always. That's the norm. Eating vegetables is new, very new, in fact. We really weren't doing it in large amounts since before about 8,000 years ago with the agricultural revolution, the earliest example of agriculture. And so before that, maybe some gathering, things like that. But predominantly when we had megafauna, access to megafauna, we just ate meat. And so maybe we knew which plants to eat, but we ate meat. So how is that a fad? How is what we were designed to eat a fad? And, cutting out food groups, who's cutting out food groups? I'm eating what we're designed to eat. That is food. Food is species specific, right? A food to look at koalas. They're only eating eucalyptus. They're cutting out entire food groups. That's a fad. Eucalyptus is a fad, right? That's ridiculous, right? Animals eat very specific things in the wild. We don't, and we are suffering for it. And this is why you have signs that, nature preserves and zoos and parks to say, do not feed the animals. They need to eat a specific diet. They get very sick if they eat outside of that. We do too. And we get the same things they do. They get all these chronic diseases. And you ask a zookeeper, like, hey, you give them kibble, you give them dog food, you give them all this, and they just look at you in horror. Like, God, no. You give animals that, they'll get human diseases. How? What do you mean? They're catching it from us? No, they're getting it from the food. The food is causing the harm, and we're eating that stupid food too. You eat outside of your species specific diet, you're going to get problems. Your body's going to break down in ways that you wouldn't expect and wouldn't want. So how is that a fad? How is eating the only thing that is verifiable food to our species, the only perfect food to our species, how is that a fad? That doesn't make any damn sense. That is someone who doesn't know what they're talking about, really.
Right. All right, here we go with another one. I'd love to do carnivore, but who the heck can afford steak or meat? I'm not rich. I've had this comment many times. What normal person can afford to buy steak every day?
Well, you don't need to buy steak every day. Ground beef is really cheap. Chicken's cheap. Eggs are cheap. Well, they used to be anyway. I don't know if they come back down. I think there's like all those memes about like buying, like houses with, rack of eggs or something like that. But no, there are cheaper options. I mean, you don't have to, it's not a ribeye diet. It's a meat diet, right? So ground beef is very cheap. And in fact, if you look and compare per pound, steak is actually cheaper per pound than spinach or lettuce. These things are not inexpensive, and they weigh nothing. You get a head of lettuce, it weighs 2 ounces and it's $5, right? Okay, well, do that another 8 times and see where you're at, and then look at the steak and tell me it's expensive, right? And in the steak, you are getting perfect nutrition that you can that will feed you for 24 hours. Right? What the hell is 8 heads of lettuce going to do for you? Right? Not much. So it actually is, when you break it down, you actually look at it, pasta, rice and things like that. Sure. That's very cheap. That's very cheap per pound, but you're not getting all the nutrients you need. It's not optimal nutrition, and you're going to suffer as a result. And what's your health worth? What's your life worth? What are your medical bills worth? What are your medications worth? You can get off of your medications. You can get healthy. You can have a new lease on life. You have mental health, mental clarity, physical health. You'll be able to do things you weren't able to do before. You'll be able to work harder, work better, be more productive, and earn more money, be better in school. Your kids will develop better. They'll be more successful, or at least have the potential to be more successful in their endeavors. And, you really can't put a price on that. It's like that it costs nothing compared to the alternatives and compared to feeling sick and feeling miserable and wretched. So, you in fact spend less, and you're not doing all the snacks. You're not doing all the Starbucks and the, 3 meals a day and 3 snacks a day. I eat once. I eat a big steak. I'm done for 24 hours. You want to do that with ground beef? That's fine. $3.99 a pound. I eat 2 pounds a day. That's it. Right. $8. I'm out the door. What did you spend on Starbucks yesterday? Right. and that's perfect nutrition for 24 hours. So in fact, if you break it down, it's actually cheaper just with the food, but also you will save so much money and earn more money in the long run than you ever will eating any other way.
Yeah. You said it. You can't put a price on it. I kind of mentioned that in my 30-day update video, but if someone were to
Mm.
say, "Hey, you can have $1 billion right now and never know about carnivore," people are like, "Oh, that's BS. You're full of it." I wouldn't take it. I would rather do carnivore. My life was so horrible before, and it's
Mm.
so much drastically better now. I guess the only other thing I
Yeah,
wanted to mention too is the lettuce and the spinach too. All that stuff gets wasted so much as well, and
it
people don't
does.
account for that price. You buy a head of lettuce and then
Mm.
it goes bad in the fridge and you throw half of it out. Well, now you just basically paid twice the amount for that lettuce that you didn't even eat half of. So,
Mm. Yeah, and it was
uh,
gross anyway.
yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
never ate it. I'm like, "Oh, I feel great now." That filled me
Yeah.
up. I'm doing the same thing
Yeah.
as you, by the way. Lion diet for 30 days, one big steak. The energy, it's unbelievable. We had a bunch of people over yesterday, and they're like, "You just eat one time?" I was like, "Yeah, 23 hours, I'm not eating anything." And they're like, "You have all this energy?" I've just been going nonstop. I'm like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
it's."
And time. You have so much time,
Yes.
I figure I probably have another 6 hours where I'm not thinking about preparing or eating food. I just go.
You are a testament to the time. I can't imagine your schedule. You're doing neurosurgery, you're helping people with nutrition, carnivore diet. You've been doing interviews and Q&As. You've been so generous with your time, but that's why I your channel, I think, resonates with a lot of people because you're speaking the truth, but you're practicing what you preach. And I was like, it's amazing that we're talking right now with the schedule that you keep doing neurosurgery and then all of this on top of it. So much
Well
extra time.
well, I would not be able to do this if I wasn't doing carnivore. Neurosurgery is, I'm um, extraordinarily busy with that. At the moment, I have a bit lighter schedule, so that's great, but it's still busy. I'm still, I still fill up all my time, all my free time that I'm not in the hospital or in my clinic, with other sort of projects. But when I am really ramping up, I mean, sometimes you can go anywhere from 90 hours a week to 135. That was the longest I've done, was 135 hours in a week, and obviously that's the whole week, and then you're into
Like,
the
is that
next
all of it?
week.
Let me do the math quick. I think that's like the whole week.
Well, that was the thing, was that I did 2 on calls during the week, and then 48-hour shift over the weekend and into the Monday, worked a 14-hour shift, so it was 62 hours straight. you know and that was the thing. I was working basically every single day, and at the hospital, and so you're at least 6 days a week, and then if you're on call the whole weekend, it's always busy as hell. It's if nothing else, you're just getting hammered with phone calls, but quite often you're going in doing multiple visits to see patients at one or many hospitals, and possibly doing surgery all night and the next day, and then rounding on 60 patients, and trying to see everyone. You don't have a team. You normally have 10 people throughout the week all doing things. It's just you and one other guy who's there till noon, and then it's just you, and it's very busy, and it'd be a lot of very sick people and getting slammed with calls. And then in what little time I had outside of that, I was on the weekends that I wasn't on call working all the time, I would do some private work in clinics, trying to see people in a functional medicine aspect, and try, because I was able to talk to people about diet and lifestyle, and improving their health and getting them off medications, as opposed to just damage control. Someone came in, they fell off a ladder and they cracked their head, and they just need surgery, or they just have a big tumor or spinal injury or something like that. They just need surgery. They need help. And so it was really nice. And so I was 7 days a week, every week. And then in the evenings, if I wasn't on call, I was doing this sort of stuff. So it was basically every waking hour of the day, I'm doing stuff. And it was fine. I was really enjoying it. It was hard. It was a lot of work. I was very tired most of the time, but it was extremely rewarding. And if it wasn't worth it, I wouldn't have done it. But because I was doing a carnivore diet, it was absolutely something that I could do. Whereas like my intern year, that hellish hours. I mean, I was doing 100 hours a week easily. It was quite often doing 115, 120 hours a week. back to back, week after week after week after week. And I hated it. It was the longest year of my life. I've been in Australia now for 4 years. It's just flown by just that fast. It's absolutely crazy how fast it's gone. And so I absolutely would not have been able to do this if I wasn't eating this way. No chance in hell, because I've done similar things when I wasn't on this, when I was 10 years younger, and hated it. It was absolutely awful.
That's the thing too. I've been telling people, I think it's true. I feel like I'm getting 3 times the amount of work done I was before, but I'm also
Mm-hmm.
enjoying it too. My mood is great. It's not like, oh, this is a big challenge. So, all right, here's another
Mm-hmm.
question. My trusted doctor disagrees with the carnivore diet and recommends eating healthier and in moderation. Wants me to start statins.
Yeah. Well, look, there's no, there's no major issue with that. You know what I mean? Because that's what the doctor's been taught. This is very new information. It's actually very old information that we've known for freaking hundreds of years, thousands of years, but it was been papered over. And so this has been, for the last 40 years, we've been told to eat, differently than we've always eaten our entire life, and expect it to go back to how we've been, throughout our existence before. It makes no sense. But, that's just what they're taught. They're taught that, meat and fat are bad. Fair enough. You can't really fault them for that. But, what you can do is you can just say, well, this is something I want to do. I would like your help. I'd like you to work with me. This is something I'm looking at, and I actually think it would be healthy for me. And I think I do want to try this, and I would like your help with it. But if, you don't want to help me, that's fine. I'll do it on my own. You are the boss. Doctor works for you, right? And so, if they say, no, you can't do this and the other, like, you can say no. Like, it is your choice. It is your body. You absolutely don't have to do anything. This is the thing with medicine. We talk about compliance, it's like, you want to recommend something for your patients. It's a matter of, how do you convince them to get on your plan, and make them comply and do it. Because a lot of patients just be like, I don't agree with that. I'm not going to do that. I think that's dumb. Or it's not something that I want in my life. So, you can just tell them, and just say, hey, look, this is something that I've looked into a lot. I'd love for you to take a look at this stuff too. And this is something that's helping a lot of people around the world. This is probably something that could really help you and certainly help your patients. And, maybe you should check it out. And, if you know a lot about it, you can try talking to them about it and just telling them about it. But at the end of the day, you can just say, hey, look, this is what I'm doing, and I want to do this. I'd like your help. But if you don't want to help me, then don't help me. It's not a big deal. Or you don't even have to bring it up. I mean, how many times does your doctor ask you what your diet is? Never,
Mm-hmm.
And so it just may not even ever come up, right? You just go about, you're doing, how's everything going? How's this going? Oh yeah, everything's fine. Oh, okay. All right. Well, your blood pressure's a little up. Let's put you on this. Let's raise that. Let's do that. All right. See ya. That's what happens. They only know that you're on a carnivore diet if you tell them. Maybe if your cholesterol goes up, like, oh Jesus, what are you eating? Just like, no, same thing. I don't know. So it's they only know what you tell them. And also, this is your choice. I think it's very important to work with doctors and your doctor. But if they're not on board, that's okay. They don't have to be on board. Doctors have plenty of patients who smoke and drink, right? That's not good for them. Doctors know it's not good for them. They don't say, hey, I'm going to fire you as a patient if you don't stop smoking and drinking. They'd lose half their patients, right? And so, it's you don't have to fall in line with their recommendations if you don't agree with their recommendations. Eating healthier, well, you can just counter with that and be like, well, actually, from what I can see, this is the healthiest way to eat. This is what our biologically appropriate diet is. Eat in moderation. What the hell does that mean? Eat what in moderation? Arsenic? That doesn't make any sense. Eat what in moderation? Well, eat everything in moderation. Cat food? What the hell are you talking about? What in moderation? And so, the idea that you can just eat anything and eat dirt in moderation, Coca-Cola in moderation, what the hell does that mean? There's a fight right now between the WHO and the FDA because the WHO defined aspartame as a carcinogen, and the FDA, which is over 70% funded by pharmaceutical companies, which are heavily invested in the food companies, say no, you have to take that back. We don't agree with you. I wonder why. Not that WHO isn't compromised either, because they are. And you know, so they're saying, well, these studies that they're looking at, we have these problems with them, and we think that it's still safe and wouldn't cause cancer if you drink it below a certain amount. It's like, okay, well, what below the recommended daily limit? Well, what the hell is the recommended daily limit for aspartame? Who the hell knows that? I've never heard that. No one ever told me. They didn't teach that in medical school. It doesn't say that on the can on the back of a can of Diet Coke, right? So who the hell knows what that is? When people are drinking Diet Coke, I know people that drink diet sodas. They drink like 20, 30 of these things a day, right? So that's probably over that. And then it's just like, oh, if they eat less than a certain amount, then it won't cause cancer. So after it does, like, I mean, what the hell? Like, so this is poison. You're just saying, I just don't have too much of the poison. You'll be fine.
Moderate
like
your poison intake.
That's a bad recommendation.
Yeah. Yeah. It's insane. And we've done it too. Moderate the amount of poison you're intaking into your body. One of the biggest things that happened to me in carnivore was stopping snoring and sleep apnea. I would stop breathing over and over again. In retrospect, I'm having these carnivore epiphanies, but it's like I was basically nearly dying multiple times a night because I was just poisoning myself with garbage food and sugar that was causing inflammation. And within a couple of days, it went away. But it's amazing how many people they're literally just kind of slowly poisoning themselves or consuming sugar and having inflammation, and all these health issues, and they just keep doing it. It's crazy. All right, here's another question. The so-called blue zones, where people tend to live the longest, are generally not carnivore, but more plant-based diets. If you want to live to be 100, plant-based is the way to go.
Well, so who says that they are plant-based? Some guy who wrote a paper and said so. That's what it was. There's not a study, right? This was like an op-ed. If it was even that rigorous, and they looked at these areas, some of the areas, not all the areas, but some of the areas that have people that live have quite a high life expectancy and a lot of centenarians, so people that live over 100 years and are, independent and healthy and moderately healthy. And they said, oh, well, look at them. They eat a lot of plants. Okay, well, first of all, the American diet, the standard American diet, is already 70% plant-based, right? So, it's actually the same. I mean, everyone's sort of plant-based now around the world. And so if you look at Sardinia, I mentioned my friend, Dr. Bill Schindler. He studies ancient cultures and societies and ways of eating and stone tool making. Like he's an international expert on making stone tools that we were using over the past 2-3 million years, and he can make them and recreate them. He can go walk around, find flint, and make a knife and some arrowheads out of it, like just on the spot, right? And he went to Sardinia. I was speaking to him about this. I'm going to have him on my podcast next week, or I'm going to interview him next week and then have it after that. I was, Elle and I were going to try to go and meet him over in Sardinia. I really wish I was able to go, but I was having visa issues. And so he said that not only so Sardinia is the first blue zone ever identified, right? And in the blue zone study, it said, oh, they're largely plant-based. Well, he went there and he lived with these people and he studied them. And he said, not only are these guys not plant-based, they're almost exclusively whole animal based. They're like cooking up whole, oxen on, spits and things like that, or whole sheep and lambs on spits. And they're almost completely carnivore. They use like plants as like garnish and seasoning and things like that, but they're just eating a ton of meat. That's the majority of what they're eating is fatty meat. And then some like locally grown wine, and that's it. And these people are extremely healthy and, very happy, very family oriented sort of people. That's another thing too. In the Outliers book by Malcolm Gladwell, he looked at a lot of these places too and why they live so long. And that, well, maybe it's genetic, and they go to these different areas and they have those populations come over to America and they're like, yeah, they don't have the same longevity. And what they found, the difference is that, back home in Europe where this is sort of a blue zone, there's a strong sense of family and community. There's often 3, even 4 generations of people living in the same household at all times, and if not, their whole families, just down the block, right? So that very, very tight knit unit and community, and he felt that had a large thing to do with this. So then you look at the other blue zone areas. They pick Loma Linda, which they say is the Seventh-day Adventists, and Seventh-day Adventists. They're all vegans. They're all plant-based. That's not true. Some are. Not everyone but I literally just spoke to someone who's in the Seventh-day Adventist church right now, and grew up in the Seventh-day Adventist church. His dad is a member in good standing, and works with them, and he was just like, yeah, we all eat meat. Everyone eats meat. There's maybe 5% of the Seventh-day Adventists who are like these crazy whack job hardcore vegans. That's it. But that is what the church preaches. They say you should be plant-based, you should not eat meat, but like everyone does, and so and a lot of these people are sick and they're overweight and they're unhappy and they're unhealthy. And I've spoken to other ones that said that actually there's a lot of chronic disease and autoimmune issues, especially in the ones who eat a lot of plant-based sort of material. So no, they're not all plant-based. Are they eating more plants in America? Maybe, but what they're really doing is eating less processed food. And also they're not smoking, and they're not drinking, and they're not having caffeine, and they're not having any other stimulus, because these are all against the tenets of the church. And they don't do drugs, and they don't engage in, high risk behavior. Who also does that? The Mormons, who have the exact same increased life expectancy as the Seventh-day Adventists, and have no such dietary restrictions or compulsions. And so, they admit that one. Okinawa, they eat a lot of pig, they eat a lot of pork, they eat some yams too. Fine, that's okay. They don't eat a bunch of processed garbage. They're not eating a bunch of high fructose corn syrup, a lot of processed sugar and seed oils, right? They're eating whole foods, and they're eating a lot of meat. So it's not because they're eating less meat. First of all, they eat more meat per capita than the rest of the Japanese population with whom they're compared to and compared against. They eat a lot of yams too. Maybe the majority of their calories come from plants, but they still eat more meat than other people. And it's whole foods. They're not eating this processed crap that did not exist 100 years ago. Right. So they're not putting things in their body that did not exist 100 years ago. So they're in the camp, post-agricultural camp, right? They're 5 inches shorter. Their brains are smaller. They're weaker. They're more likely to get sick and die young, but they're not like in the insane disease state that the majority of the world is finding themselves in now. And then, and you could just go on like this on all their examples of the blue zones. And there's so many critiques on the blue zones because there's so much to critique on the blue zones. But one thing that they don't, obviously there's a lot of native populations who maybe they have a lower average life expectancy from birth. The Messiah, they say, oh, they only live to 60. No, that's average life expectancy from birth. And when you're having babies out in the savannah, when lions and hyenas are running around, and the infant mortality rate is sky high, and you have to fight off lions from eating your cattle or your family with a stick, right? Your life is a little different, isn't it? And so you might die from other causes. And so it's not that they're like just getting knocked off from heart disease. They're extraordinarily healthy people. And when they die of old age, it's at extreme age. The Native Americans in the 1800s, they were routinely living well over 100 as fit, healthy, active adults living in a Stone Age fashion, right? None of the comforts of modern society and medicine, much to their benefit. And and they were eating largely just buffalo, and they were known to be, there are studies showing that they were the tallest population on Earth. Not anymore. Average height of a population denotes the average health of the population, and the Native Americans who were eating basically just a 100% carnivore diet, maybe a bit of berries and a couple things here and there, but mostly just pemmican and buffalo, and they were the tallest human beings on Earth, right? And they were also extraordinarily healthy, lived extraordinarily long lives. And so, they're not looking at those populations and look like, wow, you have a whole bunch of people living over 100 years old. That's amazing. They didn't look at those, right? But let's just look at the ones that we have, government issued birth certificates that we trust. You shouldn't trust it from a lot of countries, but from Hong Kong, I think you can trust them. And Hong Kong has the highest life expectancy from birth of any modern population, period. And they eat more meat per capita than any other modern population either. So, why wasn't that included in the blue zone? Why wasn't that, looked at as saying, hey, actually, this goes against that? So maybe it's not the plants. Maybe it's something else that they're doing. Maybe it's they have, strong family commitments. Maybe they are just omitting processed foods. And in a lot of places, they're actually eating more meat than the populations around them, and certainly cutting out a lot of processed garbage. I don't even know how much processed garbage Hong Kong is cutting out. It's a major, it's a major metropolitan city. So they have full access to high octane crap as well. And they're eating a lot of meat on top of that. And they live longer than everyone else. So there are a lot of problems with the blue zones, and they're definitely not plant-based. And the people living over 100, it's not because they are not eating meat. It's because they are not eating other crap and living their life in a much better way in other regards.
Great. It's so impressive how you have all these facts and figures. I just want to say this real quick. I wish I mentioned this on our other video. There's a link in the description that we did a week ago, but the other video we did wasn't live, and Dr. Chaffee didn't see any of these questions. So he didn't see any of these questions today either. So when he's rattling off these facts and figures and truth, it's pretty impressive. That last video really resonated with people. So there's a link down in the description below. How about we do maybe one more, and then I'll jump over to the comments. And again, lots of new people on here, a whole bunch of people. If you have any arguments against the carnivore diet or reasons that you didn't want to start the carnivore diet, please try to leave those in the comments, maybe a big Q next to them, and we'll tackle some of those next. So here's one more. If the carnivore diet is so good, why are there no peer-reviewed studies to back it up? And are there any legit studies that actually support carnivore?
So, depends on the journals you're reading. So there was a study done specifically on modern day Americans who are carnivore, done by Harvard, and it's peer reviewed, and with over 2,000 participants. And people say like, oh well, this is just a survey. People ask questions of it. Like, yeah, that's how nutritional research is done. That's how they do it. All those studies that say like, oh, more fiber is better and more, vegetables is better. This is how they did it. They asked people what they were eating and what their medical issues were. That's it. And so, this is actually more rigorous than most of those things, and it was certainly much more honest, because the authors were not thinking that they were going to get this answer. They were actually probably looking like, oh, let's show the harm this is causing, right? And you can read the shock in the authors' minds when they're writing this. They're really surprised at the massive positive results. Everyone improved, right? And something like at massive numbers, like the vast majority of people, improved or put into remission their type 2 diabetes, their autoimmune issues, corrected blood pressure, corrected blood tests in other regards as well. And the vast majority of people did that. And so, that has already been done. And it's great because that opens the door and gives it some legitimacy, and opens the door to other bigger studies, possibly interventional studies, which I think would be very important. But there are tons and tons of studies that you can glean information off of. First of all, there are thousands of studies now going over decades, actually really 100 years, looking at ketogenic diets and how this helps massively with health. Well, what is a carnivore diet? Carnivore diet is a ketogenic diet. It's a more stringent ketogenic diet. It's not only are you cutting out carbs, you're also cutting out the rest of the plants too, and the fats that you're getting in to raise up your ketones are animal fats. They're not plant oils and seed oils and things like that. So it's just a more whole food, natural, optimally designed ketogenic diet. So there are tons of studies showing you have massive health benefits from ketogenic diets, which a carnivore diet is or should be. And, and then other studies showing that, just getting rid of seed oils gives a massive, massive boost to health, and maybe even can help reverse a lot of issues and diseases as well. So you can glean a lot of information from that. And then you look at studies just looking at what humans ate and our biology and our the anthropology and paleoanthropology, and looking, okay, what did humans actually eat? Well, what we've been eating for the past 2 million years is what we're supposed to eat. What lions have been eating for the last 2 million years is what lions are supposed to eat. What koalas have been eating for the last however long they've been eating eucalyptus is what they're supposed to eat, right? So this is what you're biologically designed and adapted to eat. You can't eat something for 2 million years, survive as a species, and thrive as a species if you are not already biologically evolved to it and designed to eat it, or you have then become optimized to it. It just doesn't work like that. That's just not how biology works. And so I've heard this argument from Simon Hill, which I just thought was insane. He's like, oh yeah, well, I'm not arguing that, people, have been eating meat for 2 million years, but, it's probably not optimal, it's probably suboptimal. This thing that we've never eaten before in human history, that's definitely better because, some study said so. Like, I just don't care. You don't understand biology from a fundamental level. If we've been eating meat for 2 million years, even if we didn't start out as it being optimal for us, it definitely would have become optimal for us. That's just how biology and evolution work. And so, it's a bit preposterous to say that what we've been eating for 2 million years is not what we are designed to eat and what we would be benefited to eat. Can we use plants as medicine? Sure. Can we use it as a crutch to get us through a famine? Absolutely. And we have. And I think that's a serious survival advantage. But that doesn't mean that it's optimal, right? And so so it just depends on the journals you're reading. So you need to go to first principles. You need to look at biology, at biochemistry, at organic chemistry, understand botany. That's a big one. Understand how our bodies work, understand what we are designed to eat. And then you don't need anything else. I mean, that's really fundamentally what it comes down to. But there are a lot of studies. That's what people say. Well, show me the study that proves this straw man argument that I'm going to put out there right now. It's like, well, that's not how this works. There's a lot of information, but it's all coming from different directions to then, piece together into the whole. But I think the fundamental one is, you're looking at what we've been eating for 2 million years. And, since the dawn of man, depending on when you think that is, what have we been eating this whole time? It's, for the most part, been meat, and that's what we've thrived on. During the ice ages, what plants were available to eat exactly? What were people eating when they crossed the land bridge through the Arctic Circle in the last ice age to cross from Asia into North America? What yams were available then? Where was the honey and fruit and manna from God? No, there was meat, and that's what you were eating. And you cannot just barely survive an ice age. Right. If the Simon Hill theory of like, oh, well, everyone was just dying and getting heart disease and cancer and all that. No record of that. Absolutely no evidence of that. It's pure supposition. That is a pure accusation, with baseless accusation. All these people were just dying off and things like that, getting cancer and all that sort of stuff. No, because if they were, they would be too sick to survive and thrive during an ice age. You cannot just eke out an existence. A bunch of people on life support and chemo are not making it through an ice age when you have to hunt mammoths and fight off saber-toothed cats and ice bears and things like that. That's not going to work. So if you do not thrive, you are going extinct during an ice age. And we not only thrived, we dominated. We went all over the globe and absolutely dominated every other animal species. That is how you become an apex predator. We are the apex predator of apex predators. We eat regularly all other apex predators. At least we used to before a lot of these things were put on the endangered list. So, that is that's what you really need to understand. You need to go to first principles, think about our physiology, our biology, our biochemistry, and our evolutionary history. It's pretty straightforward. We were eating meat. We're eating plants too, sometimes. Not during the ice ages. Sorry to break it to you. And in a lot of areas, even when we did have plants available, like the Plains Indians and the Aboriginals in Australia, there are many records that are very clear that even when there's plants available, they chose to eat meat instead. And people in southern Canada, what is now southern Canada, during the colonial period, there are many accounts. I mean, I read these in high school, talking about how, like, well, look, it's covered in ice, 9 months out of the year. So granted, you can't grow crops, during that time. You have to eat meat, but surely during that 3 months you could live off the land, right? And they said, but yet they don't. They only eat meat. They only hunt. They continue to only hunt. And it just blew these guys' mind. They were like, why would you live like that? That's crazy. Because it's the healthiest way to live. That's why. And it's the best way to do it. And so, even then, even when they had access to plants, they weren't using them unless they had to, unless they were starving or needed to use them medicinally. And those are just the facts. And the facts are the facts.
Great. Man, we have almost 1,200 people here on my side.
Wow.
Yeah, so many great comments. We really appreciate all the comments. Dr. Chaffee, you have your YouTube channel and the podcast. I was just going to mention to people, we're getting some questions that are just sort of personal carnivore questions, and then we're getting some that are more arguments, kind of looking for more of the arguments. But if you have the questions, you're doing lots of Q&A live streams. Is that right, Dr. Chaffee?
More recently, yeah, and I want to do them more regularly. So I'm like Friday morning Perth time, Thursday evening USA time. I'll be doing a regular spot, like I did this past week, and so I'm going to start doing that sort of regularly.
Great. Yeah, so be sure to check out his channel. So now I'm going to jump into a few questions and arguments from the viewers. Let's see, we got quite a few here. Oh, here's one. Why do we have canines? I hear this one a lot. Our teeth show that we're supposed to eat vegetables and not meat.
Oh, well, I mean, that's the thing too. And people will say, well, we have canines, so that means that we must eat meat. And people say, well, but we don't have canines like, a dog does or a lion does. Well, and then these same people think that you should feed your dogs and cats with big fangs plant-based diet, and that's best for them too. There's a lot of issues there. We have primate teeth. We are primates, right? And so we have teeth similar to other primates, and then we've just sort of changed biologically in one direction or another, right? We do not have big, large fangs like a wolf or a lion, and that's because we don't kill things with our mouths, right? So we developed tools. We developed our brains. Our brains grew exponentially when we became. First of all, it was growing bigger and bigger as we were eating more meat, and then it exponentially grew when we became apex predators. And because we're getting extremely highly nutritious food, and we had to be smart about it. We had to use tools. We had to survive during really nasty times. We didn't have big, thick, woolly fur. We didn't have big claws and teeth that we could just tear down and just rip down a mastodon and eat it. We had to figure out how to outclass an animal that dominated us on every physical metric. We figured out how to go into the ocean and take out whales, for God's sakes. I mean, this takes a lot of strength and a lot of intelligence and a lot of tools, right? We had to figure out how to build a damn ship and all the equipment and things like that to go whaling. So this takes a lot of intelligence. And so it's selected and designed for intelligence as well as strength and as well as size. We got taller, we got stronger, we got smarter, and we developed more tools. And that's why we live in houses and lions don't, because we developed the intelligence to make these tools and tactics to take down these animals, where a lion just needed its physical characteristics. It didn't need to be smart enough to figure out how to do it. It had to be smart enough to be able to know where the food was and how to get it and how to survive, but it didn't need to be so much more intelligent that it had to be able to figure out tricky ways to get around the fact that we don't have big claws and teeth. So we have primate teeth with carnivorous adaptations. to our species. So our teeth are smaller than a gorilla's, right? Because, as we're eating softer and softer food, our teeth are getting softer and softer. We're not chewing on sticks all day like a gorilla, right? Gorilla has massive teeth, big old fangs too, big old canines, right? You look at a gorilla showing its fangs. It has big fangs. They're herbivores, right? They only eat plants. They'll get some bugs with the plants. They eat their own feces as well, because that's the only way they can get B12, because no, B12 does not come from plants. And it doesn't just come from the bacteria in the dirt. It comes from the bacteria in their colon, but that's past where they can actually absorb B12 in their small intestine. So they have to eat their own feces to then put that back through for another pass and get those nutrients that weren't there the first time, right? Any vegan wants to do that, you can do that. I'm just going to stick with steak, right?
Right.
And and so we're not chewing on sticks all day. So we have smaller and smaller teeth, smaller and smaller jaws, smaller muscles of mastication, our temporalis muscle, right? In a gorilla, when you look at a gorilla's head, it's a big head. Its brain's tiny. It's small. It's actually the smallest for its size of any primate. Most of that bulk in its head is not skull. It's those chewing muscles. And that attaches to a ridge down the middle here. And so this big clump of muscle there. And so we didn't need to do that. We're eating softer and softer food, and all of that stuff is shrinking down, and our digestion changed dramatically as well. But that's the answer for the teeth. If you look at primate teeth, you go to the zoo, sometimes they'll have models up of chimpanzees and gorillas and things like that. You'll see this is sort of similar. They're much bigger, and they actually have big pointier fangs and things like that. But that's what it is. We have primate teeth that have evolved in the direction that we evolved, which is eating meat.
Got it. We had a couple super chats here from Barry Simon.
Oh, thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for the super chats too. Any super chats I get on my channel, they all go towards the Carnivore Diet documentary. So I really appreciate that. Is grass finished measurably better to eat? Kind of a question there. But then this other one, I get a lot of people weary about starting carnivore because they're worried about fiber issues. How do you offset constipation issues?
Sure. So, grass finished, it is, or you actually can measure how much better it is. It quite often will have, any number of times more nutrients, especially the micronutrients, like, the vitamins and minerals and things like that come with it. You look at, I've spoken to some regenerative ranchers, and their beef is 4 or 5 times more nutritious, has 4 or 5 times more vitamins and minerals than what would be published in in the data and the normal stuff that you get at sort of like Safeway or something like that. But grass finished isn't necessarily regeneratively raised. So, if you have, you're rotating, pastures, and the ground's just getting more and more fertile and more abundant, and more and more healthy, then the cows are going to get more and more healthy and nutrient dense as well. And so if they're doing that in that manner, they'll be even more nutritionally dense. But at the end of the day, even the Safeway beef is extremely nutrient dense. It's more nutrient dense than anything else you'll eat, certainly than any other plant on earth, and it's completely bioavailable as well. So the vast majority of people do not only just fine, do amazingly well on just store-bought, grain finished beef. There are more nutrients in the regeneratively raised animals there. I mean, that's just an objective reality. And there's a different complement of fatty acids as well, sort of better fatty acids, more omega-3s, things like that, less omega-6s. And there's more like branched chain amino acids for some reason in the grain finished cows as well. Some people think that that's not a good thing. I don't know. I don't know of any rigorous studies on that. I've only seen sort of associative studies with that. So I don't know, and certainly not on carnivores, but either way, it is different. But does that make a marked difference in your health? We don't have great studies on that. The studies that we do have generally are people in a mixed diet, and so this grass fed and finished, and who knows what grass finished is. You can actually say something is grass fed if it's ever eaten grass in its life, because that's just how they market these things. So you have to know that this is 100% grass fed and finished. So some of these studies depending on their end points and end markers, didn't really see too much of a difference in health between one or the other. That's not to say that there isn't one. It's just that we don't really have a study that's been designed in that manner. But there is an objective difference, absolutely. Most people do just fine. If you're eating just Safeway beef, I mostly eat Costco beef, and because that's what I have access to. I can't really get grass, regeneratively raised things out here. I'm trying to source that sort of stuff. I might have to get it shipped over from the East Coast from my friend Wolke from Wolke Farms, because he does exactly that, and he has super highly nutritious animals out there. But I've checked my bloods. I've checked the bloods of my patients, and checked their vitamins and minerals and things like that. They're all in optimal ranges, and in much better ranges than the normal good range of like, oh well, it's in range, so it's fine. Most people are vitamin deficient and mineral deficient, and so that reference range is actually too low. And so if you actually want to look at optimal range, like this is the best, this is where you want to be for good health, that's a very different range. And so that's what I look at. And it's and they're at least approaching that on a carnivore diet, just eating Costco beef or whatever. And that's what I'm doing. And all my numbers are right up there in that optimal range. So some people will be a bit different. Some people, especially with like the MTHFR gene, I've spoken to sort of several people, a growing number of people now, especially who have that. They can't metabolize folate as well, and they seem to get symptomatically low folate. A lot of people will have sort of just an off number on their folate or something like that, and they're not really symptomatic with anything. I still tell them probably top it up just because, but some people are symptomatic and they don't feel their best. And so, maybe they might need to get that grass finished, or maybe add in a bit more liver, which is even more nutrient dense. And so just something to think about. But, if that's all you can afford and that's all you have access to, it's still amazing. It's still better than anything else. It's like silver medal at the Olympics, right? So grain finish got silver medal, right? Silver medal lost to the gold medalist, right? But silver medalists also beat everyone else on earth. So it's still the better option if you can't get grass-fed and finished. How do you offset constipation? You eat more fat. If you're getting constipation, it means you are not eating enough fat. I did a whole video on this. Basically says you don't need fiber. It's called Fiber, Constipation, and Diet. And it just goes through how our digestion works and how it's actually run by fat. And we only have a limited capacity to absorb fat based on the amount of bile in our liver or that our liver produces. And after you've absorbed all the fat you can with the bile that you have available, it's very difficult to absorb fat. So the vast majority of it will go out, right? Like 85, 90% will go out. And that is what keeps your stool soft. And so if you're not getting as much fat as your body wants, your body will absorb every ounce of fat that you're eating. None will go out the other side. It will get all dry and rocky and hard and not fun. But if you are eating more fat than your body can absorb, first of all, it's not too much. There's no such thing as too much. If you're not absorbing it, it just goes out, right? And so this is actually what people say, oh, I'm getting diarrhea on a carnivore diet. So people get worried about going into it with constipation, and then they go into it and go, my God, I can't leave the bathroom, And so you get the other side of it, and that's because they're eating a lot more fat, or normally they're still drinking coffee and using artificial sweeteners, which are both laxatives. Regardless, if you're getting constipated, and constipation, you have to define your terms. Because most people think, well, if I haven't just gone to the bathroom daily, then I'm constipated. That means I'm blocked up. No, that does not mean that. You're absorbing 98% of the meat that you eat. You can't absorb any fiber. So all of that comes out. So we're just used to eating all this bulk that has to come out. So people are, they're going to the bathroom a few times a day, and they're like, oh, that's normal. I didn't go today. I've talked to some people, and they get so worried about this. They're giving themselves laxatives. They're giving themselves enemas. I'm like, okay, is there a big clog coming out? Well, no, it's just all liquid. I'm like, then you didn't need to go. Like, there's nothing there. There's nothing blocking. Oh, but I'm blocked up. Well, but you're not blocked up because no blockage came out, right? It was all liquid. It doesn't liquefy the stuff. It just moves it, right? That's what a laxative does. And so, you will absorb 98% of the meat that you eat if you're not eating it with plants that will disrupt the absorption of the meat that you're eating. And so you will just go less often because you will have less waste, right? But it should still be soft. So constipation is by the Bristol stool chart, right? So that's consistency, not timing, not frequency, right? So as long as it's soft, you're not constipated. If it's dry and hard, that's constipation. You need to eat more fat.
Got it. Less waste in, less waste out.
That's
All
it.
right. Here's another one, another super chat. Thank you so much. And this one is a little off topic, but kind of not, because a lot of people are worried about carnivore long term. And Dr. Chaffee, you've been doing carnivore for a while. So this person was asking, could you compete now at the same level you did at 25 physically? And how do you think you will hold up physically into your 50s, 60s, and 70s?
Well, I don't have to guess because I did it. When I went back on a carnivore, 2 weeks after being back on a carnivore diet, when I realized this is what I was doing in my early 20s, when I absolutely felt like a superhero and performed physically like one, I was just like, right, that's what I was doing. I knew it. I knew plants were trying to kill me, get rid of these stupid things. And I just ditched them. And then I realized, like, this is actually our biologically appropriate diet. This makes sense now. And everything started making sense to me as a doctor, as a biologist, and from my own experiences. Right. And so, I always remember looking at that period, that 5-year period in my life. It's just like, I just felt like a absolute just demigod, and it was just like, what was so special about that? And I always think back about that because I was like, well, I wasn't drinking. I'd stopped drinking during the rugby season. At the same time, I had stopped eating plants, and I had just obviously had a huge benefit from stopping drinking. That made a massive difference. But all of the benefits I attributed to that, and that was a big part of it. It comes from plants. So we want to get rid of those plants, but it wasn't all of it. And so the rest of the time in my late 20s. Late 20s, early 30s, when I was still playing rugby at a very high level, I did not feel the same way. I was still not drinking during the rugby season. I never drank during the rugby season, very rarely. And I was just figuring out, well, I'm just older now. I'm over 25. You're just dying. You just start dying after 25. It's not the case. Mm-hmm. And so when I was 38 and I came back on this, and I was overweight, out of shape, had just been in Bangladesh doing humanitarian work, and was certainly not working out while I was over there. Hadn't played a full season of rugby in 3 years. I'd been helping out with family health emergency, and really just doing that and focusing on my family. And I felt so good after 2 weeks, and I just felt so amazing. I was just like, this is incredible. I wasn't getting sore after working out. I lost 23 pounds in 10 days. And then I just started stacking on muscle. I was doing crazy workouts. I was doing 20 sets of everything. Couldn't get sore. I ended up pushing myself doing 32 sets of squats just to see if I could wear myself out. I couldn't. Mm-hmm. And I still wasn't sore the next day, which out of everything I say, that seems to piss people off the most. Bullshit, you get sore. I'm like, I just don't. I'm sorry. You won't either if you just stop eating plants, mostly carbs. That's mostly grains and carbs and things like that. That seems to do most of it. And so, on that time I did 32 sets of squats. The next day I wasn't sore. I felt great. I was walking up the stairs 2 at a time, just like I hadn't done anything. So I was like, great, let's go hiking. Went hiking with a friend up this like 3-hour hike. It was, it was miserable. Felt fine. There was no issue. Got to the top. Everything's fine. Came back down. I was like, I am just feeling amazing. Like, it's Thursday night. It's rugby practice tonight. I'm going to play rugby. And so I went back out with my team, the Seattle Saracens, or now the Seattle Seawolves. It was their first year of going into Major League Rugby, and now just turned professional. So they had all these professional players from the U.S. and other countries that are now playing there. Ended up winning the whole MLR that year and the next year, which is fantastic. And I was like, yep, going back out. I'm playing some rugby. And I was still very out of shape. I'd only been on a carnivore diet for 2 weeks, and, but I just felt so good. I'm like, I'm going to push myself. I remember this, I could just push myself as hard as I could, and I could never wear myself out. Let's see if I can do that still. 38 years old, did that, having not played a full season in 3 years. And I was at a dead sprint the whole time. Felt absolutely amazing. I was step for step with everyone there who'd been training for months before that. And I just felt great. I didn't look great. I did not look like I was in shape, but I was able to compete just because of my diet. 2 weeks after that, we did a fitness test. I've finished, I think, probably in the top 5 or 10 out of 92 players on the team. I'd only been running for 2 weeks. It was all diet. I just felt absolutely incredible. Unfortunately, later on in the season, I ended up hurting my knee and flaking off some cartilage underneath my kneecap, and just swelled up my knee. It got an effusion, and I wasn't able to play. Unfortunately, that really bummed me out. But my body felt amazing, and I was playing in different games with the Saracens and the Canadian Premiership, and I just felt amazing. I felt like I did when I was 22, except I had, another, 15 years of experience now. It was, and more, bulk. So I was still pretty bulky, and I was trying to slim down, and, and I just felt absolutely amazing. I felt like I was a kid again. I felt better at 38 than I did at 28, playing in the Super League at back in San Diego. I felt absolutely amazing. And I kept going like that. So I was able to rehab my knee, got that better, came down to Australia, and started playing in the Western Australian Premiership here with one of the teams. Great group of guys, and I then had was in very good shape at that point. Had slimmed down, was quite lean and muscular, and I was 39 years old. And I'm going and I'm pushing myself, and I'm physically, athletically, speed wise, endurance wise, I was at the top of the pack. And then people started mentioning something about age. And the guy that I played rugby with, it was an Irish guy, and one of the other guys knew him. And they were like, yeah, he's getting older now. He's 35. And I'm like, oh, I'm 39. And he's like, you're 39? I was like, yeah. It's like, you didn't know that? He's like, Jesus. And so that sort of sent ripples around. They're like, holy crap. They're like, okay, we're really going to actually pay attention about this carnivore diet now, because you're 15, 20 years older than a lot of these guys. And you're very fit, very strong, very fast. And unfortunately, I had my other knee flaked off cartilage and had the same sort of effusion and problem. And I wasn't able to finish that season. And since then, I have not had the time to get back into it. But I absolutely feel fantastic. Physically, I can still lift weights for hours, even though my knees hurt because I have arthritis under my kneecaps, bone-on-bone arthritis under my kneecaps. The rest of the knee is pristine. The rest of my joints throughout my body are pristine. That, unfortunately, is not pristine. But I have a lot of pain, and it just doesn't really bother me. It's much less than if I were eating other things. That pain would be much more. But like physically, athletically, if it wasn't for the fact that my knee would swell up if I, sprint or anything like that, I would be there right now playing and hitting people. Like, I cannot tell you how good that would make me feel to just smash somebody, on the rugby field, because that was like my joy in life was doing that. But just today I went sprinting, doing hill sprints, stair sprints, and things like that. It's all fine. So, as long as my knee doesn't blow up, I feel fantastic. So, to answer that question, I feel fantastic. I expect in my 50s, 60s, and 70s, I'll feel exactly like this. And hopefully there's some sort of miracle cure at that point. I can regrow some cartilage. And, if it can, I'll be in my 50s smashing some heads,
That'd be amazing.
And it won't be in the 50s and older club either. Like, I'll be there, mixing it up
with the young guys. Yeah.
Everyone. Yeah.
It's I got to show you this picture, Dr. Chaffee. So I did an interview with this gentleman, Alex, from the UK. And it's pertinent to this comment in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Hopefully this will show up okay here. So you see this picture. This guy is a carnivore for over a year now. His name's Alex. I just did a video with him. You see the after picture on the right. You want to take a guess at how old that gentleman is on the right?
Well, it looks like he's about, he could be anywhere from late 20s to 35. But obviously it's a loaded question, because that's the guy on the left as well, who looks well older than that. But he looks like he could be anywhere from 28 to 35.
I love it. So we had we had our triplets 16th birthday party yesterday. We had about 50 people over. I told Alex, I'm like, dude, I hope I'm not freaking you out, but I'm showing everyone your picture. The guy on the right, that version of Alex, is 65 years old.
Jesus.
It's unbelievable. It's absolutely. I did a 1-hour interview with him, and just talking to him, I'm like, first I'm like, okay, this is BS. You Photoshop this photo,
Yeah.
and I want to see your passport identification. I talked to this guy for an hour, and he just has the most inspirational story. Defying aging. So to
Mm,
Bishop's deep learning question about 50s, 60s, and 70s, check out Alex. It's unbelievable. Doing carnivore for over a year, changed his entire life. So much energy. Just talking to him on the phone too. He
that's
sounds like he's
awesome.
in his 30s or 40s. He's just full of life and energy. It's like he's given himself a new life at 65. He's got a whole nother life to live now versus
Yeah.
before, where he was having mobility issues and pains and arthritis and inflammation and all those things. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny.
Well, yeah. Well, it is funny. I mean, 'cause he does not look that old, and so that's absolutely fantastic. I mean, we think about, well, what are you going to be in your 50s, 60s, and 70s? Well, what were the Native Americans doing in their 50s, 60s, and 70s? And at 100, 110, they were still living as Stone Age nomads, right? Running around with a pack on their back, following the buffalo herds, right? You can't, you sink or swim out there, right? And so, people can look at the interview I did with Maggie White, who's been a rancher and a carnivore for over 65 years. So she's just through pure preference. She just never wanted to eat anything except meat growing up. And she really fought with her parents as a kid. And eventually her parents were like, look, she hates eating anything else. She's healthy and strong. Let's just let her just do what she wants. So she's basically been eating carnivore her entire life after adolescence. And certainly all of her adult life, because she ended up dropping out of veterinarian school at UBC up in Vancouver when she was, just a late teenager. I think she started college early. It was an undergraduate program then. So she was like 17, 18, something like that. And she just said, actually, I don't want to help treat other people's animals. I want my own animals. She really loved animals and big animals and things like that. So she just, quit school and went and worked on a ranch hand, became a cowboy. And she, as her words, she says, if you're working cattle, you're a cowboy, man or woman, you're a cowboy. And so she went out and became a cowboy. And she was hundreds of miles away from civilization. And she said that the only thing that you ate is what you grew or raised, right? And so they had meat available because they were raising cattle. But if you wanted vegetables or fruit, you had to grow it yourself. And she's like, I'll be damned if I'm going to work to eat vegetables. Like, I don't want to eat vegetables. I'll just eat the meat. Thank you. And so she did. And so she just continued to just eat a meat diet. She raised 10 kids on a meat only diet on her ranch. And she is 82 years old now. She's 5'10". She still has blonde hair. I didn't see any grays in her hair. And that's her hair. And her picture looks like she's maybe in her 50s, like a good 50, and she's 82 years old. She's still working. She's still working 14-hour days in blizzards. I was talking to her on Christmas last year, and we were trying to, set up an interview, and she was just like, hey, I'm really sorry. It's been like a 14-hour day. We had a blizzard come through. It was minus 40. And we were like, had to do these things to save the cows, or the cows, will die, and so they, they were just working on Christmas, all hours of the day and night. Because that's what you do. She just bought another ranch down in Colombia to sort of save the family farm down there. And so they did as a sort of a rescue operation because they wanted to. And they have plantains and bananas and coffee and things like that. She's 82 years old, and she was emailing me talking about how she's climbing up 20, 30-foot trees to cut off bunches of bananas, lower them down to the ground, and then carry them, up a hill to get to the truck so they can take it to market at 82. Right.
Wow.
I mean, most 20-year-olds aren't capable of doing that these days,
Right.
and, so that's what you're going to be like in your 80s. Right. And, and like I said, Native Americans were living well over 100. We are biologically, genetically designed to live 120 years based on the length of our telomeres. That's what I was taught in genetics. And, so 80 years old is literally middle-aged, right? Certainly 60 is. And so, and that's what she says. She's like, look, I'm middle-aged. That's it. I've still got a lot of life left in me. I've still got a lot of work left in me. This stuff makes me happy. So this is what I'm going to keep doing. I had another, another quick anecdote which is a friend of mine who works in geriatrics here in Perth. She had a patient who was 86 years old, had checked himself into a nursing home basically because he couldn't take care of himself at home anymore, and his family couldn't either. And so he checked himself into a nursing home basically to die. And that's what that is. You can't take care of yourself anymore, so you're just sort of waiting out your time. And it was very sad. So he somehow came across my videos, and he decided to go carnivore, just a sort of last ditch effort of getting his independence back. Within 3 months, he was not only back living at home fully independent, but he was lifting weights 3 days a week, swimming twice a week, and had come off all medications at 86.
Wow.
That is nuts. Literally aging backwards, literally turning back the clock, and curing himself of these major issues and giving himself his independence back. Is that there's no greater gift than your independence.
Absolutely. That's been one of the most sort of touching things with carnivore for me. I've had so many comments on my channel from people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s thriving on carnivore over and over again. That's going to be a big part of the Carnivore Diet documentary. We're going to talk about obesity, diabetes, stomach issues, IBS, autoimmune disorders, but aging is a huge one, because who isn't worried about getting older and slowing down? And I'm hearing story after story, like Dr. Chaffee just said, of people that it's not an issue for them. And these people are saying it was the inflammation. It was the food I'm eating. It's slowing me down. It's causing me to have arthritis. It's causing me to have aches and pains, and you don't have to have those things. So yeah, that's just amazing. All right. I want to be respectful of your time, Dr. Chaffee. Do you want to do a couple more?
Yeah, I'm good, man. I've got time. So
okay.
However much time you have, I'm happy.
This is awesome. There's so many comments here, though, so there's no way we're going to be able to get to all of them. But like I said, I've got Dr. Chaffee's YouTube channel below. Maybe hit him up on one of his live Q&As he has coming up. Here's one. Another super chat. Thank you. Can the planet support 8 billion humans eating a carnivore diet?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So you guys should look up Dr. Peter Ballerstedt, Ballerstedt. I've interviewed him. I think that's quite a good interview. I've seen a lot of his talks, and I was very impressed by him. He's a PhD in forage agronomy. He works in this field. He really understands the ins and outs of how cattle and livestock affect the environment, and actually how they significantly benefit it, and actually how plant agriculture, crop agriculture, commercial monocropping is extraordinarily detrimental. So so I have an interview with him, and we cover quite a lot there. And so that will answer all of your questions. And you'll just be like, this is what we have to do. Not only can the planet support 8 billion people eating carnivore diet, it has to. It's not going to support 8 billion people eating a plant-based diet. We have about 50 more growing cycles before we've completely destroyed the integrity of our soil, topsoil, and growing surfaces. It is devastating to the land to grow these crops in the way that we are. We lose about 27.5 billion tons of topsoil per year because of our farming techniques, and we're just tilling up all this land, and the topsoil is getting blown away. It takes 500 years to grow a centimeter of topsoil. That is a limited resource that will go away. So 27.5 billion tons of topsoil, that's an area the size of Kentucky every single year, right? And so that's a vanishing resource. And I'm not saying this. Other people are saying this, that there are about 50 growing cycles left before we've completely cashed out the integrity for any sort of commercial purposes anyway. And so and you cannot have plant agriculture without animal agriculture. It's the animal, manure and some of the waste products of their bodies, like the bone meal and things like that, bone and blood, that go into the fertilizer, and that's what puts the nutrients back in the soil that the plants then take out of the soil. And then we eat them. But I mean, the land is getting so depleted in this that like the spinach of the 1950s had 3 times the nutrients that it has now, right? And so that's across the board. for plants. They're so nutrient deplete now. And so, it's actually imperative that we start eating more animals, because that's going to give more manure. That's going to actually make the land better. People like Dr. Alan Savory, who's written books on this, textbooks on this, has been doing this for 40 years, taking herds of animals through, a bunch of them moving like a migrating herd, is reversing deserts, right? So the animals don't turn land into deserts. The lack of animals turn land into deserts. There's a symbiosis. There's a symbiotic relationship between plants and animals. They need to be able to eat down, the dead, dying, overgrown, grasses and things like that, so that the new sprouts can grow. The hooves need to go in and just dig up the turf a little bit, so that seeds that roll through, they're round. They don't just keep rolling, get washed away with the rain. They actually get stuck there, and then they can actually grow. And then the water actually pools and sinks and actually gets into the ground, instead of just washing away. So there's a lot of things that go into it, and animals are so important to this. And so, also when you think about it, where are we growing crops? We're growing on arable land, right? So it's just flat land that you can also put cities on, because that's what we do. That's what competes with farmland is cities, right? Because you have big flat areas, you can build a whole bunch of houses and buildings, right? Harder to do that in mountains. That accounts for about 4% of the Earth's surface, arable land, including oceans, obviously. So the entire surface of the Earth, about 4% of the entire Earth is arable land, right? Not much in the grand scheme of things. And we're losing an area of Kentucky of topsoil every year, right? But rangeland is I think it's about 15% of the Earth's surface. Forest land is about 10% of the surface. You don't need to run animals on arable land. You have to grow crops on arable land, but you can run cattle through rangeland and through forest, right? So the rest of the land, we can actually run animals through, and we can make that land much more habitable and much more fertile and much better able to grow more plants and support more animals. I mean, look at the Great Plains, when there were hundreds of millions of buffalo and probably over 1 billion other big, large animals, deer and antelope and all these other sorts of things, right? The land was so fertile that, I mean, it was just one of the most fertile and verdant areas in the world. And the grasses were so tall that there were descriptions of the explorers being able to tie the grass in knots over their horse's head while on horseback. Right. They were saying it was over 9 feet tall. So it was just in the middle of India, the tall grass where tigers are hiding and things like that, or you're walking through with an elephant or something like that. They were going through that with horses, and they weren't able to even see above the grass. They were like, that's crazy. And so the more animals there were, actually, the more fertile the land got, and the more plant life it could support. So in fact, we have to eat more. We have to raise more animals, because the earth will die out without more animals. And so if we don't do that, we will be in serious, serious trouble.
Got it. All right, here's one. Do you think this diet is optimal for all humans? Is there a chance certain people are more adapted to eating plants the same way people can't digest dairy?
Yeah, so there are people that are more adapted to eating plants than other people. People of European descent and other areas that have had access to, or their ancestors had access to, agriculture for longer. They're going to have different adaptations to defend themselves a bit better against these different defense chemicals that we find in plants, and the different disruptions to our metabolism and our biochemistry that we get from eating this sort of junk. But that's in comparison to people like the Native Australians, the Native Americans, who are 4 times as likely, when eating a Western diet, they're 4 times as likely to get obesity, heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and all the rest of the chronic diseases, right? But only when eating a Western diet, right? And so you have to ask, that sort of begs the question, well, what's a non-Western diet? What are they eating that we're not, and vice versa? Well, what they were eating traditionally was just a high-fat, meat-based diet, very little plants, if they didn't have to use them medicinally or for starvation purposes. And that has changed. And so they're not as adapted to that. So they're much more damaged by them. And they don't get as much nutrients out of them. They're not as bioavailable to them. So, but what does that mean? Does that change what's optimal for them and us? No, that just means that the suboptimal things are less bad for us than it is for them, right? And so, but that doesn't change what's optimal, right? So, if Kerry was, didn't get damaged as much by like lead pipes or something like that, as I did, that doesn't mean that lead is good for Kerry. It means that it's less bad for him, right? But it's not like leaded pipes are optimal for you for some reason. It's just because you get affected less than I do. So optimal is a very different thing, and you will never find two examples of you'll never find an example in nature of two members of the same species who have different optimal diets. It doesn't exist. Koalas eat what koalas eat. Lions eat what lions eat. Pandas eat what pandas eat. Blue whales eat what blue whales eat, and so on. Like that is just across the board. Why would we be the only exception to that rule? Now there are people that again can do better comparatively on plants, but that does not mean that those plants are optimal. It just means that they're less bad.
Got it. Good stuff. All right, maybe one more question. Yeah, wow, we've got an hour and 40 minutes. This has been great. Here's one more. Why do some people get low testosterone on carnivore diet while others like yourself have optimal, even when they're trying to just eat fatty meat?
Sorry, let me just read that. Why do some people get low testosterone on carnivore diet while others like yourself have optimal, even when they try? That's a good question. I mean, that's something that some people have said. I think Dr. Saladino thought that his testosterone may have gotten a bit wonky. Dr. Baker published his lab results, and his testosterone was fine. Maybe it was just sort of a bit on the lower end, but it certainly wasn't low. Look at the guy. The guy's not low testosterone. The guy's a beast. And one of the things that he pointed out was that when you're eating a lot of carnitine and other sorts of things, you actually increase your testosterone receptors. And so you don't need as much testosterone to get the same or greater effect. And so that could very well be what's going on there, is that, just like, and people pointed this out for, thyroid hormone as well. Professor Finney, who's been studying ketogenic diets and how this affects our health for decades, he talks about this and how people's thyroid levels may go down a bit, but they are completely asymptomatic. They're actually better, if anything, and it goes into why this you actually don't need as much because your body's working more efficiently and effectively. So that can happen as well. You can also be eating things that can disrupt your system as well. There are people that eat copious amounts of organs. I don't think you need to do that. Certainly not eat more organs than you do normal meat, because there is more normal skeletal muscle, meat, and fat than there are organs by a long, long margin. And so it's very possible that if people are eating these things in abundance and they're getting hypervitaminosis of one thing or another, or just too much of one thing, that can disrupt their metabolism and their hormones in one way or the other. Certainly can affect your thyroid. Hypervitaminosis A is an abundance of vitamin A in liver. So if you're just eating just a buttload of liver, you could get that. And it's very hard to clear because vitamin A is fat soluble. It takes a long time to get rid of that. And so, hypervitaminosis A is a known cause of suppressing TSH. So as you get, even if you're getting sort of borderline higher vitamin A, it starts going up a bit, that can start suppressing your thyroid stimulating hormone. So if you're suppressing your thyroid stimulating hormone, you're not going to get the signal to secrete more thyroid hormone, right? And so it's your levels are going to go down, but that doesn't mean that that's just because of a carnivore diet. I mean, you're doing something else, And so when I sort of advise people to eat this way, I tell them to be cautious about organs and eat in proportion of the animal, right? If you're hunting, you take down a deer, it only has the organs that are in that deer, and it has a lot of meat otherwise. So the majority of what you're going to be eating is the muscle meat and fat. It has one liver, it has one heart, it's got 2 kidneys, it's got a spleen, right? So it's not going to have 50% of your meal should not be organs, and it certainly shouldn't just be liver every time. You know what I mean? And so people can get those sorts of problems. I mean, I think if I remember correctly, Saladino's testosterone may have been affected. I've seen a lot of people make that statement like, oh, well, why are people's testosterone going down? First of all, I haven't seen Saladino's blood, so I don't know this for sure, but I think someone was saying that he did, but don't quote me on that. But literally, I just really never seen anybody. I've seen people say that. I've never actually seen it actually happen to anyone. And in the hundreds of patients that I've put on this over the years, I see the exact opposite. I see their testosterone going up. I see their thyroid normalizing. I see their their B12 and their folate and magnesium and zinc and all these sorts of things going up and up and up and up and up, and D3 and all these sorts of things. And so, I only see people getting better. I've had, people that I've spoken to and helped out who are athletes, top athletes that have like literally doubled their testosterone. One guy more than doubled his testosterone. And, how is that not like just the greatest advantage as an athlete? You just, without any sort of supplementation, without any sort of over the counter or under the counter sort of supplements, all of a sudden you've doubled your testosterone and likely your growth hormone and other sorts of things, and done it in a physiologically balanced way that the whole body is tuned up to use this appropriately. That is going to be a massive, massive, massive advantage. I have never seen someone's testosterone go down, and their testosterone is going up. And as Dr. Baker said, they're getting a lot of carnitine. Their testosterone receptors are going to go up as well. So they're going to get even more bang for their buck by boosting their testosterone. So, some people say that, but I have yet to see it, and I have never seen it on someone who eats mostly skeletal meat and fat with some organs every now and then, but not going outside of proportionality to the animal. I have never seen that.
It's been my experience as well. Like you were saying earlier, I said this on some of my earlier carnivore update videos. I feel like I'm superhuman. My testosterone levels, I'm sure, are very high. I'm going to do an update video where I get all of my work done and share that. But definitely feel a million times better. Wow, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much. I feel bad because this just went crazy, which is great, reaching a lot of people, which is the goal. Unfortunately, there's just so many comments in there. There's no way we'd ever be able to get to all of them. But anyone that's from my channel, Homestead How, I highly encourage you, go subscribe Dr. Anthony Chaffee's channel, check out his podcast, and hit him up on some of the Q&As if you had a more of a personal carnivore question that we weren't able to get to here today. And this has been a lot of fun. Thank you, Dr. Anthony Chaffee.
Yeah, no, you're very welcome. Thanks very much for doing this with me. I think it's great. We had a great turnout. Thank you, everyone, for coming on. This is massive. I mean, it's a huge amount of people. I'm very sorry we couldn't get to everyone's questions. I do wish we could sort of do like a lightning round and just sort of do at least like the super chats or something like that.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Do you want to try to do that? I mean, I'll try and be brief. I know I'm not.
No,
I know that's why we've run out of time, is because I take 30 minutes to answer a question.
I think we're seeing the same. I don't know if let me see. Here's one. I got that.
Yeah, I think this in the starred chats and in our review, that should be from both of our channels. So we'll see the same stuff.
What's a good way to convince my mother who is going through chemo and radiation for breast cancer to eat keto or carnivore? Maybe some books or videos you can point me to.
Professor Thomas Seyfried, Seyfried. He's a professor at Boston College and biology and teaches cancer biology. He's published over 150 peer-reviewed studies and papers on cancer biology and keto, well over. And so he really shows exactly, the cancer biology mechanism and how the cancers feed on glucose as well as glutamine. Breast cancer, there are studies. There's one in particular looking at triple negative breast cancer, which is an extremely aggressive form of breast cancer, responds extremely well to a ketogenic diet. So so he has a book called, I believe he has a book called Cancer is a Metabolic Disease. He has talks on YouTube of the same description. He's had a lot of interviews. I've interviewed him on my channel, which, I thought that was a fantastic interview. Just because I just thought it was fantastic information that he was giving. And so you can look that up. And I have a lot of links in that description as well to his other works and things like that as well. So I would start there. I would show her that interview on my channel with him. And if she bites on that, you might be able to get his book, or you look at other resources from there. But I think that's the best way to do it.
Great. Another $10 super chat, Bishop's Deep Learning. Thank you so much. We got that one already. Infinite Epic super chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And let's see here. Survived an aortic dissection in 2016. Have no gallbladder. Had lost 30 pounds doing carnivore last year, but now the gallbladder issue seems to be causing problems. How should I proceed?
Well, it depends on what gallbladder problems you're having. I mean, you don't have a gallbladder, so they shouldn't be causing you problems. If you don't have a gallbladder, really what you're just going to have a problem absorbing fat. Your liver will still make bile, but it just sort of drips it out constantly over the day and night. And so you have to sort of catch it, because, your gallbladder stores it and concentrates it and then spits it out in bulk to absorb a big bolus of fat that you've been sort of waiting up for. So if it's been 5 days, it's going to have 5 days worth of bile ready for you, all concentrated, ready to go, because it still needs the same amount of fat whether or not you're eating. And so that's how we get gallstones, by the way, is it just sits there. We're not eating fat. It's not from eating too much fat. It's from not eating enough fat, because that sits there and gets concentrated. What does any hyper-concentrated solution do at rest? Turns into precipitate, turns into stones and crystals, right? And that's what bile sludge is. That's what gallstones are. And so if you don't have a gallbladder, then it's just going to drip out. And so you'll probably have to, if you eat a big meal of fatty meat, you'll probably have diarrhea, because a lot of that fat will come out and you won't be able to absorb it. So it will come out in that fashion. Not everyone does, though, and they generally form what's called a pseudo gallbladder, which is just sort of an outpouching of the common bile duct. It acts the same as a gallbladder. It sort of stores bile and can squish it out. So if you can eat a big, large meal of fatty meat in one go and not get diarrhea fairly soon after that, then you probably have a pseudo gallbladder, and you can just eat normally. Again, that thing I did on fiber constipation, and diet, that sort of tells you how to figure out how much fat to get based on whether you're constipated or getting diarrhea. And if you can't eat a big meal and without getting diarrhea, then you just need to split up your fatty meals throughout the day. You just need to space those out and eat the same amount, but just split it up throughout the day to try to catch that bile as it's constantly dripping out.
Got it. All right. Here's another one. The part where you guys were talking about poison in moderation reminded me of a stream Dr. Chaffee did recently, where he told a story of an ancient Greek king and how he became immune to hemlock.
Yeah. That was interesting. There was a guy, I can't recall his name at the moment, but it was quite ironic, and I laugh as sort of it was pretty nasty. He was so paranoid about getting poisoned, like getting his food poisoned, getting his drink poisoned, all this sort of stuff, because that happened. A lot of people died from that, in a position of power because someone wanted his spot. And so he would microdose with hemlock and other sorts of poisons, and just constantly do this. He did this for years and years and years and years and years, and maybe survived some assassination attempts. Who knows? But then he got invaded. They got taken over. He was sort of, on the run. They sort of caught him, and he's sort of penned up somewhere. And he's just like, okay, they're going to torture me and humiliate me. I've just got to end it. And so he went to just like, Socrates himself, and drink a glass full of hemlock, and it didn't kill him. And he couldn't kill him. He couldn't give himself enough poison to kill himself. So they ended up catching him alive and doing whatever they did to him, unfortunately. But so that was it. He was able to build that up, and that's what that is. It is a poison, but you will build up a tolerance to it. Tiny little bits and amounts of it. That's how alcohol is. You get really drunk the first time you do it, or you get really high on heroin, and then every time after that, it's a little less, a little less, a little less, until the point that you're just it takes a couple bottles till you get drunk, because you're drinking a bottle every day, and then you don't drink for 6 months, and it's not the same. It's not as difficult to get drunk anymore. So there's that tolerance. Call it hormesis if you want. I don't. I call that tolerance. It's not hormetic, because it's not giving you an overall benefit. It's only giving you a benefit towards exposure to that toxin. That's not the same thing. But yeah. So poison in moderation is a bit funny.
Right. Speaking of funny, I love some of these names. We got Radioactive Brawn Man. Super chat, thank you. What about broths and spices in general? Is it fine to add spices, mirepoix, for broths and meats?
I'm not familiar with mirepoix, but spices in general, look, people do whatever they want, and and if this helps you do a carnivore diet and spice up some meat or something like that, and that keeps you on track, by all means do it. I feel a lot better without it. And spices, they have that strong flavor because your brain is trying to warn you. Our tongue and our brain are sophisticated machines, and they can identify harmful toxins. That harsh, intense taste, that is your brain screaming at you, going, spit this out. Do not eat this. That's toxic. Get it out of there. If you put a mouthful of pepper, started chewing that up, you'd be spitting that out pretty quickly, right? We put a little bit on it and we say, oh, that's nice. I don't actually think it's nice anymore. I actually prefer the taste of meat. I don't like covering up the taste of meat. If you've got to put a bunch of spices on meat and things like that, probably not eating very good meat. You should learn how to cook it better and make it nice, because you really enjoy the taste of meat. But for that reason, because that harsh taste, that intense flavor is toxins. That's what you're tasting. And so I don't feel my best. I don't like that. So for me, what I think is optimal, and what I do for myself, I think it's as important what not to eat as what to eat. So you're eating meat, you're eating fatty meat, that's great, but I don't eat any plants or fungus, no sugar or artificial sweeteners, nothing artificial. Right. And that goes for sauces, seasonings, and drinks as well. So that's for me. That's how I feel my best. Most people will be able to tolerate spices just fine, depending on your heritage. Broths, if it's a meat broth, bone broth, that sort of thing, without a bunch of noodles and celery and carrots and things like that, would be great. I would avoid all the other things, obviously. I will say this: depending on your heritage, you should probably avoid spices as well. So European ancestry and spices make me feel a bit crummy for an hour or two afterwards. I don't like that. I don't like feeling a bit crummy. I want to feel my best all the time. And but I have spoken to a lady who's in my challenge group, my 30-day carnivore challenge group, and she, very nice lady. She was Native American, actually Inuit heritage, Northern Canadian. And, just culturally, they ate a lot of meat, hunted, and, ate moose and things like that, which is like the best tasting animal on earth, by the way. Everyone should try it if they can. And her daughter had a lot of food allergies and food sensitivities, that sensitive to poison. I'm not shocked about that. So she said for about 40 years, they'd been carnivore. They were just eating meat, but they were eating spices as well. So she used a lot of spices in her cooking, but they only ate meat. They didn't have any sides. So she was doing this for 40 years. She was in her mid 50s, late 50s, and she looked extraordinarily young and healthy for her age. But she said that she had actually 4 autoimmune diseases, which is quite surprising, having been doing carnivore for 40 years, but she was using spices. And so she said, she looked at my challenge. I said, and my thing is just basically, getting rid of the last 5% of plants makes 95% of the difference. And that's just been my experience, is that people get a big bang for their buck just getting rid of that last little bit of it. And she was like, well, that can't be what it is. That can't be what's causing my autoimmune issues. It's spices. It's just spices. I'm eating meat already. She tried it for 30 days. She dropped the spices and she's like, damn it, they're getting better. And so she actually put her autoimmune issues into remission, just dropping spices. So, if you come from ancestry that's had spices for thousands of years, you're going to be a bit more tempered to that. And if that makes you happy, I would just be sparing with it. And I would look to, at some point, cutting them out completely and just having a month, 30 days of just meat and water, maybe a bit of salt to taste, but just meat and water, nothing else. And just see the difference. I think you will be surprised that how much better you feel even without the spices.
All right. Started carnivore a few months ago from traditional keto. Love how I feel. However, I do miss nuts, particularly macadamias. Do you ever eat nuts?
Nope.
Next question.
So, yeah, look, they're a plant, so I don't eat plants, and especially seeds and nuts, grains, beans, legumes, all these things are seeds, right? So that's a plant's baby. Everything protects its baby more than anything. And so, this is where you'll generally find the highest concentration of toxins, plant toxins. And so I particularly don't eat nuts or seeds or anything like that.
Yeah, that was something I think that got me really bad on keto. I had way too many, and then they're so easy to overeat as well. But
yeah,
I know for certain I feel a million times better not eating them now.
Yeah, me too.
From Karsten, super chat, thank you. How does carnivore help with debilitating chronic fatigue syndrome? Progress, but still bad after 11 months ruminant carnivore.
Well, look, there are a lot of different causes of these sorts of things. We don't really know. I mean, there's like Lyme disease. There's post-viral fatigue syndrome. There's a lot of other things as well. So it really does depend on what's causing that. But it can help just because it's going to optimize your health in a lot of ways, and it can help your body and your immune system fight off something that's lingering around, if there is something, or try and bolster you up and try to rebuild after an insult that's sort of torn you down. But these things can take time. These things can take a lot of time. The good news is you have progressed. That's a good sign. Progression in the early stages, which you're still in. I'm sorry, but 11 months is still early times. That's a good sign. So progression in early stages is a good sign that you'll continue to get progression. So just be patient with it. Look at that and go like, hey, what am I able to do now that I wasn't able to do 11 months ago? And think positively about that. Once you're able to start exercise, especially weightlifting. Anaerobic exercise is such a good stimuli for our bodies to heal, repair, and to grow and actually age backwards, to reverse aging. You can lengthen your telomeres by exercising. You will increase your testosterone. You will increase your growth hormone, and reduce cortisol. All of these things are conducive to better health and to more energy. So when you're able to start lifting weights or doing push-ups, even if it's just a few or a couple pull-ups or whatever, body weight squats, start doing it. Then start doing it more and more and more and more and more. And the more you do, the more you'll be able to do.
All right. Another super chat. Thank you, Paul. What advice would you have for someone struggling with binge eating and food codependency?
Well, I think carnivore diet is really good for that, because you don't have to limit what you're eating, and you don't have the addiction craving that you do with carbs and sugar and seed oils and things like that. So you just eat meat until it stops tasting good, fatty meat until it stops tasting good, and it will stop tasting good. Now, you may be used to eating larger portions, and you say like, oh, okay, well, I should make all this stuff because that's what I'm normally used to eating. You'll find that you'll get to a point, probably, fairly soon into that meal, that your body's telling you like, oof, this is just not enjoyable. I don't like eating this. I don't want to eat this. It's not that you want to eat something, but you may want to eat something else. Not that your body wants you to eat something else. It's that your body's telling you, hey, you don't need to eat anything else. So it tastes bad. So meat it tastes amazing at first. And then if you keep eating it past the point your body wants it, your body's very smart. You have receptors in your stomach that actually track up to your brain to tell your brain how the nutrients that are in your stomach right now. It says, hey, this is what we've got going here. How much more do we need? Yeah, we still need more. Keep bringing it, keep bringing it, keep bringing it. Okay, stop. And so that's what that positive feedback from good taste is. And then afterwards it goes away, and it becomes negative impact at that feedback at that point. So people can find that they're like, oh my God, I've been eating, I got halfway through the meal and then it took me 2 hours to finish it. And I sort of explained to them, I was like, no, you were actually finished 2 hours ago. Your body was telling you that. So you get to eat exactly as much as is nice to eat, and then your body will naturally tell you to stop. So just stop. Carb cravings and sugar cravings in particular are an addiction, just like, nicotine or tobacco, or nicotine or caffeine or something like that. I mean, these things just, they are drugs, and they give a dopamine response, and they have a chemical addiction. And, but like any other drug, you can beat it. That chemical addiction goes away after a certain time, usually about 2 weeks. So usually people's sugar addiction, carb addiction will, sort of settles down or it goes away. Some people a little longer, some people a little shorter, but that's sort of a ballpark of what I've seen. And if you're getting carb cravings and sort of really want to eat something, maybe ask yourself, am I hungry? Is my body telling me I'm hungry? Because your hunger signals will be very different. You have to relearn your hunger signals on a carnivore diet, because you're not deranging your hunger signals with a bunch of, insulin and leptin and blocking leptin and screwing with your blood sugars and things like that. So just eat meat until it stops tasting good. If you're getting carb cravings or sugar cravings, ask yourself, am I hungry? Try eating meat. If it tastes good, you're hungry. Keep eating meat until it stops tasting good. And just look for the light at the end of the tunnel after 2 weeks. Make it anybody can do anything for 2 weeks. All right. So just get through to 2 weeks. You'll feel very, very differently. And and then do another 2 weeks, and another 2 weeks, and then you're through, man. So usually like the worst of it is then that 2 weeks. You make it to the other side of that, you should be fine.
Absolutely. I found myself when I was doing strict keto, if I did it for years, I would incorporate like a cheat day or this, and I would end up binge eating a whole bunch of stuff like Paul's saying here.
Mm-hmm.
My biggest thing I tell people, because some people are like, I'm doing carnivore, and they'll do it for a week, and then they're like, I did so good, I'm gonna go eat off plan now, like this is Weight Watchers or something. And I know for myself, for me, if I had like a little raspberry, I would go off the rails, and I'd be eating sugar, and I'd be back to binge eating again. So I would also just say, don't cheat on carnivore. It's not worth it. And it's not like Weight Watchers or something where you're counting calories. You can knock yourself out of ketosis, and then all those cravings come back, and then you got to do it again. But yeah, like Dr. Chaffee said, you can do anything for 2 weeks, and I have no cravings, obviously no binge eating problems at all anymore. Doesn't even cross my mind anymore. Got one from Martin. Recently, I came across a claim that carnivore increases SHBG, which supposedly messes up the testosterone function. Can you please address that?
Yeah, so that's steroid hormone binding globulin. And so, that's the difference between your total testosterone and your free available testosterone to be working. So you can have your total testosterone be really high, but if your steroid hormone binding globulin is high as well, you're going to have less free T3 that's available and bioactive. Again, not something I've seen. This is just not something I've seen in labs. This is something that Dr. Saladino has mentioned in his own labs, possibly in his patients' labs as well. But again, he was telling his patients to do what he was doing, which was very organ heavy carnivore diet, which is a lot better than a lot of alternatives. But I do think you can run into trouble with hypervitaminosis. These are nutrient dense to a fault. And so if you're eating too much of these things, like the Inuit don't eat them at all, because the organs of the predators that they eat, generally they're eating predators, they're not eating herbivores. And so the vitamins, nutrients, and fat soluble ones are actually more and more concentrated as you go up the food chain, right? So you're eating the organs of a seal. After a while, you're gonna get very sick. You can't eat the organs of a polar bear at all, because you'll die. If you try to eat the liver of a polar bear, you'll die from vitamin A toxicity. So they don't eat the organs; they give those to the dogs. They just eat the skeletal muscle, meat, and fat. That's what you need. And so I do see people having these weird sort of issues are generally the ones that are eating a lot of organs, and so I don't know what it is about that's raising their steroid hormone binding globulin, but I know that mine is not raised, and I know that I have no patients who have increased their SHBG and dropped their testosterone. Their testosterone, their free testosterone, is going up, and their SHBG is not going up appreciably. And it can be affected in other ways as well. It's funny. There's a strong correlation between people with low steroid hormone binding globulin and anxiety, and being sort of neurotic and sort of a bit on edge all the time. So there's weird things that go on with it as well. What's causing what, I don't know, but again, I've never seen that in practice. I certainly haven't seen that in myself. And I've only heard about it sort of on the internet, and people just saying, "Oh, doesn't this do that?" Not that I've seen. And I think that's coming from Dr. Saladino, who had that experience himself. And I think there are reasons for that. He attributed that to being in ketosis too long. Okay, well, I've been in ketosis longer than him, and I do not have that problem. The Inuit have been in ketosis a lot longer than him, and they don't have that problem. And then people will say, like, well, but Inuits don't have high enough ketones. They're not in ketosis. Bullshit. They are making blood sugar, they're making glycogen, they are making ketones, they are not eating carbohydrates. So what the hell do you call it? They're in that so-called fasting metabolism, that ketogenic state. They are able to produce energy and mobilize their energy stores from their fat stores and make carbs, glycogen, and ketones. That's what keto. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about ketosis. I really don't care if your ketones are 37. Like I've never checked my ketones. I never want to check my ketones. I have no interest in my ketones. I'm just going to eat meat because I'm designed to eat meat. I'm going to let my body get on with it.
I get that question a lot too, and I'm like, what would I do differently? I just eat meat and I drink water.
Yeah.
Nothing I can do.
Yeah.
So.
Right, I don't know how I would use that information.
Right,
like,
exactly.
like, oh, there's my ketones are 3. Great. Oh,
right.
Now there's 6. Awesome. Okay. Yeah. I'm just going to keep working. Thank you.
Yep. Looks like we got one more here from Paulette. Thank you. Dr. Chaffee, can you address debilitating essential tremors? Husband seeing good results from recent DBS, deep brain stimulation. I Googled that. I didn't know that off the top of my head. And I'm sure you did. And we've both gone strict carnivore.
Oh, that's great. Well, I mean, there's no studies that I know of, even with keto and tremors, but that doesn't mean that there aren't any. Sort of tickling at the edges of my memory about keto, but I can't say for sure. But the thing is that this is going to help in so many ways. There are a lot of different causes of a lot of different things, and a lot of them are to do with eating the wrong diet. And then you can actually build up damage, and you can permanently damage things and parts of your body and your brain and nervous system included. And, going back on an optimal diet can help things, won't necessarily completely alleviate things. I'm glad that the DBS is helpful. I literally put in 2 of those last week. So that's, you sort of drill holes and sort of put these things into a certain part of the brain and sort of give it a bit of stimulus to say, okay, yeah, that's working. That's doing what we want to do. You can actually wake people up during the operation, say, okay, let me see your hand, do this, do all these sorts of things. And they're like, yeah, okay. Now we sort of move it, change the frequency, and all of a sudden they can't do it, or they can do more, or all these sorts of things. And so you get it right at the right place and at the right, dosage. And that's great. I'm really happy that is helping him. It's a great surgery. You really help people. I think carnivore is likely to help a lot as well. I can't say that it's going to help his essential tremor. I can say that it's going to help him in 1,000 other ways and improve his health significantly. And I would say, based on what I can see, it would likely extend his healthy years of life and life in general. And so even if it doesn't help the essential tremor, which jury's out on, because I have seen so many neurological issues benefited so greatly by going on a carnivore diet. Perfect example is a guy who I've had on the podcast, and I did a live with yesterday, Dave, who has a channel God, people find my live. I'm blanking on the name. I think it's like No Carbs or something like that. But it's but anyway, he had a stroke 30 years ago, and when he was 19, and he had right-sided weakness ever since. And it was very difficult for him to walk around. He was, limping, staggering, very difficult to go up and down stairs. He had to clutch onto the rail with his left hand because he didn't have the strength in his right hand. And he was very unbalanced. He was very worried about falling down the stairs every time he went up and down. 2 months on carnivore, his wife noticed. He's like, you're walking differently. He's like, huh. And she videotaped him, and he was just walking completely normal. And he said now he can run up and down stairs. This is 30 years after he had a stroke. That's insane. Your brain's not supposed to recover. It's supposed to be, it's thought that if you have damage, that the axons can sort of tear, and they're just flapping loose. And from, the side that your neuron is from, that can start growing down more. And if they happen to catch and grow in, then they'll go back down the pipe, and you'll regain function. But if they go over here, it's gone forever, right? And so you sort of see that. You sort of see that in 6 months, 2 years. And after 2 years, it's like, well, what you have is what you have, 30 years later, this guy got his life back, and his strength back, and his mobility back, and his coordination back. That is incredible. So, I don't discount anything. I just say, hey, just take a look, see if it works for you. It is doing a lot of really good things, and it's going to improve your life in so many other ways. Anyway, it's well worth trying regardless. And hopefully it helps. And if not, DBS sounds like it's working.
Great. Awesome. I think we hit all the super chats. That's great. Yeah, this has been great. Thank you so much, Dr. Chaffee.
No, you're very welcome. Thank you for putting this on. I think it's great. And I think it's really good to have, things like this, and people putting out those challenging questions, because those are the things that people are worried about, and they're coming to carnivore, or they're seeing people get good results like yourself, and they say like, okay, well, that sounds good, but like I don't want that at any cost. I don't want to be, like a deal with the devil where I have 10 good years and then I'm screwed and I die young and all these sorts of things. So, that's not what people want. So it's very important to address these things, and it's important to, to discuss them in the open, and have people be able to ask questions, and challenging questions, questions that are designed to stump you. And, and if they do, oh gosh, I don't know, ooh, maybe we shouldn't do this, maybe that's a reason to think twice about it. But all of these things have answers, right. And, this really does work for people. From what I can see, all the best evidence shows that humans are carnivores biologically, and that our optimal diet, the thing is going to give us the best health for all of us, is from what I can see, a high-fat carnivore diet. And I've just seen absolutely miraculous things happen to people, and diseases that people have just denied could ever be reversed are being reversed en masse now. And now it's funny, they're saying, no, that can't happen, that can't happen, that can't happen. Now they're saying, well, yeah, it can happen, but it's because you're getting rid of seed oil, and you're going to die in 10 years. No, 5 minutes ago you said it couldn't happen ever, and yet now I'm showing you 10,000 people where it happened in a published paper. Yeah, but yeah, but like this is just the right way to eat. People are getting better, they're getting healthier, and this is what we've been designed to eat. We've been eating this way since time immemorial, and that is obviously what we're designed to eat. If that's what we've been eating this whole time, then that is what that's what we're designed to eat. If we didn't start out being designed to eat it, we became designed to eat it through the process of evolution. That is how biology works. That is how the world works. That is how life works. And I'm sorry if you don't agree with that, but those are the facts. And that's how this works. So I'm going to keep doing this, and I'm always happy to answer questions as much as I have time to. And I appreciate everyone coming on, and hopefully that answered a lot of questions and help people, make up their mind about whether they want to give it a try themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was hoping maybe I could stump you on one, but you knocked them all out of the park, which I kind of figured would happen. But yeah, maybe we'll have to do another one of these sometime. This has been great. I think This would have really helped me when I started carnivore, because there was several things I was worried about. I'm like, this is insane. I see these people doing well, but it's just nuts. But when you get over that fear and kind of the emotion, and you see the facts and the truth, and there's so many things that you say, and then it's just like, oh yeah, okay, of course, like that makes perfect sense. It's like so much
Mm.
clearer now. So yeah, I think this is really going to help a lot of people out, and I really thank you for your time. This has been great.
Oh, you're very welcome. It was an absolute pleasure. And hopefully everyone here enjoyed it.
I think they did. Thanks a lot, Dr. Chaffee. Everyone, thanks everyone for joining, and have a great day.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.